know when to strike and how to disappear. Murders stack up, all unsolved. But when a pregnant woman is assassinated, agents vow to stop the violence. A twisting battle ensues, and the line between cop and criminal blurs. Unless agents can solve the case, no one is safe.
In the 70s and 80s, a gang of thugs wreaked havoc on the island of Puerto Rico. Organized, experienced, and deadly, they seemed beyond the reach of the law. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. As a U.S. Commonwealth, Puerto Rico falls under the jurisdiction of the FBI. Agents discovered the gang was run by corrupt cops, men sworn to protect, now out to kill. The fraternity of law enforcement was splintered and at war.
July 28th, 1977, San Juan, Puerto Rico. New York diamond dealer Stephen Brooks visits the island on his annual business trip. He plans to meet a local jeweler to collect money from an earlier deal. He also wants to sell from the new inventory he's carrying $250,000 worth of quality stones. He's alone, with no bodyguard. Brooks is scheduled to return home in 2 days. On July 29th, Puerto Rico police respond to the discovery of a body outside the city. It's an adult male shot with a .38 caliber gun, then burned severely. There's no driver's license, and because of the fire, a visual ID is impossible. Police find no other clues and bury the murder victim as a John Doe. 4 months later, media coverage prompted by Brooks's family helps police realize it was the diamond dealer's body they found. The murder is part of an alarming trend. In the last few years, at least 2 other U.S. diamond merchants have been killed in Puerto Rico. Special Agent Fernando Candelario.
We had transportation of jewelry by individuals coming in from New York specifically. Ended up in Puerto Rico. These individuals were kidnapped. Their bodies were found later on.
Since the slayings have an interstate aspect, the FBI works with local police, but no solid evidence points to any suspects.
The agents would communicate with their counterparts at the police of Puerto Rico to see if the police of Puerto Rico had developed any leads.
But with no leads reported, the cases grow cold. At the time, violent crime is common in San Juan, where poverty mixes with a surging cocaine trade and drug gangs rule the streets. Authorities have trouble sending the powerful gangsters to prison. In March 1979, one major gang leader under investigation for murder silences the only witness to that murder with a gunshot to the head. The gang leader's girlfriend, Jessica Trujillo, witnesses the killing and later agrees to help put the gangster away. Special Agent Jim Bird of the San Juan FBI.
She was going to testify in the homicide case against a pretty well-known organized crime character there in San Juan. This girl, because they were aware of the danger, the threats against her, was kept in police custody.
Jessica spends her days at the police station, and at night, homicide detectives drive her to her grandmother's house to sleep. The trial begins in May 1980, and prosecutors look forward to finally getting a guilty verdict against a major drug lord. But then, on the trial's 5th day, a body is discovered in a sugarcane field near San Juan. It's Jessica Trujillo, the only witness against the gang leader. An autopsy later reveals she was shot twice at point-blank range, execution style. And she was 3 months pregnant. The only evidence recovered, a Panama hat found near the body. The terrible murder shocks island residents, including San Juan FBI Special Agent D. Rosario.
Jessica was very well known in the news media. It was well known that she was going to testify against this other individual whom she witnessed murder another man. And it was well known that Jessica was being protected by the police. The allegations were, at least the rumors initially were, that since she had been in police protective custody, apparently she was murdered by police officers.
Suddenly, the unthinkable seems possible. The Puerto Rico Bureau of Special Investigation, known as NIE, works potential police corruption cases. They ask the FBI for help.
It was a matter of trust. Whom do you trust? And the NIE thought it better to trust the FBI than to go to the police department itself and try to find someone there that they could really trust to conduct this investigation.
FBI and NIE agents interview the detectives in the homicide division and are stunned when no one claims to remember who had custody of Jessica the day she was killed.
No cooperation was obtained at all. None of the investigators were going to talk at all about this thing.
It's an ominous turn. Agents get nothing but interference from police officers sworn to protect and serve. The strict code of silence frustrates FBI Special Agent Angelo Class.
It was obvious from the outset that the police officers were somehow involved. Either they had given Jessica up to somebody or they had killed her themselves.
Yet the truth remains elusive. Finally, agents track down the officers said to be responsible for escorting Jessica the night before her body was found. Detective Victor Sousa claims that he and his partner, Detective Gil Valera, drove Jessica home as scheduled. Their alibi is that they left her in front of her grandmother's house. Victor says he has no idea what happened after they dropped her off. Perhaps someone abducted her. Agents try to corroborate Victor's story.
We interviewed many people. We went out to her grandmother's house and conducted a neighborhood investigation there.
No one reports seeing Jessica at all that day. And then, the one clue that had been recovered disappears. The Panama hat found near Jessica's body mysteriously vanishes from the police evidence locker. Media reports claim the homicide chief often wears a Panama hat like the one in question. And agents determined the car used to drive Jessica home that night belongs to the Puerto Rican homicide chief himself, Emeterio Benitez. Agents secure the car, and FBI technicians examine it for evidence. Its interior surfaces have been recently cleaned, according to NIE Special Agent Manuel Aponte.
You could smell the bleach on the car. We figure out that, it was clean because something might have happened in this car, something like a murder or something that was trying to be covered.
FBI technicians dismantled the car. Beneath the front seat, they discovered dried blood, a lot of it. More blood appears beneath the dashboard and behind the passenger door panel.
The way the blood was distributed in the car, we believe that a person had been killed in that car.
Technicians also find ballistic evidence, marks that appear to be from a bullet discharged inside the car. At the FBI crime lab, examiners compare the dried blood to samples taken from Jessica at autopsy. But there's a problem making a match.
Back then, we didn't have DNA. So the only thing we could say was it was the same type of blood as Jessica's, but we couldn't say that that blood came from Jessica.
When agents question Emeterio, the homicide chief calmly explains he bleached the car's interior after transporting a dead animal in the back seat. He says the bullet marks came from an accidental weapon discharge months earlier. He has no idea how the blood got there, and explains dozens of people have access to his car due to a tight departmental budget.
His car was used by almost everybody in the homicide division. Whenever they were short of cars, they would use his car. He would lend it out, so that we couldn't know for sure who might have been in the car. We didn't have enough physical evidence. Circumstantial, yes, but not physical. And when we charge somebody, we really want to go with a case that we're extremely confident in, that we're going to be successful in its prosecution. So we didn't want to take a chance and not be successful by prematurely charging anybody with a crime.
Suddenly, instead of one suspect, agents have dozens, and still nothing solid to act on. Somehow, the agents of the FBI and NIE have to break through a wall of silence to get to the truth. In 1980, FBI and Puerto Rico NIE agents suspect corrupt cops were somehow involved in the death of Jessica Trujillo, a government witness murdered while under police protection. Evidence suggests the shocking possibility that Jessica was killed in the car of homicide chief Emeterio Benitez. But it's not enough for an arrest, especially with such a high-level suspect, according to FBI Special Agent Jim Byrd.
I mean, there was some circumstantial evidence, but again, this is not a guy with a criminal background. This is the head homicide investigator for the whole San Ramon metropolitan area. You can't just say, we think you did it, you're coming with us. The case wasn't going to be solved for some time.
Because they're investigating cops, and they're not certain who they can trust, Special Agent Angelo Class and the rest of the team cannot allow any leaks.
When we started, we were given our own room, and nobody was allowed back there unless you were working on the case.
The agents desperately need someone on the inside. They check into the detectives who allegedly drove Jessica home. Gil Valera and Victor Suse.
We kind of profiled them a little bit. We asked other agents about them. We found out more about these two individuals. And we felt like of the two, the more serious individual, the better cop, if you will, of the two was Victor. And so we decided we were going to appeal to that goodness inside of Victor.
At the time, Victor is finishing up his regular National Guard training in the U.S. Agents are ready when he comes back.
So we intercepted him at the airport, and we told him we wanted to talk to him, and we took him voluntarily to an apartment that we had rented as a safe house.
The agents need to get Victor to turn informant. It won't be easy.
He started denying having any involvement in anything. We had the wrong guy.
NIE Special Agent Manuel Aponte appeals to Victor's sense of honor.
I told him, well, listen, if you didn't kill Jessica, I want you to help me out, find out who were the murderers. And you're a homicide detective? I'm not a homicide detective. And you're one of the best homicide detectives. And in fact, he was. So I need your help.
They let him know now is his only chance to save himself.
The idea was, if you don't cooperate with us, we will conduct the investigation, we probably will charge you and convict you, and you will lose your family, you'll certainly lose that rank that you're wearing, you will go to a federal penitentiary, and the only way you can avoid this is by coming clean and telling us and cooperating with us.
They assure the detective they will protect him. After several hours, Victor finally agrees to cooperate. He admits lying earlier. He had not driven Jessica home that night as he first reported.
He was told to say that by the chief, that he and the other agent did not take her home. He doesn't know who took her home.
Victor claims many detectives are involved in a host of criminal activities. They call themselves El Muerta Escuadra, the Death Squad.
He started naming people and crimes, and we were taking notes, and I mean, for days.
Through a series of interviews, the full scope of the corruption becomes apparent.
Within the first 10 to 15 debriefing sessions with Victor, we had probably identified about 65 individuals, mostly police officers, that were involved in crime. But they also there were some lawyers and some business people. We decided we would then group to find out who was involved in criminal activity with who, and what kinds of crimes they were involved in. And then when we had all these groups, it appeared as if though we were dealing with 19 different groups.
Special Agent D. Rosario helps identify the corruption's epicenter.
The majority of the officers that were involved in corrupt activities came from a specific division within the police department known as the Criminal Investigation Corps, the CIC.
The CIC is made up of the highest-ranking detectives on the force and the most powerful.
Basically, they were their own fiefdom. They were out there doing their own thing. And basically, they did not have to answer to anyone for their actions.
The CIC runs all drug busts in San Juan.
They became very powerful, and so they began to develop a lot of sources of information and informants out on the street.
According to Victor, those sources became collaborators in a series of armed robberies, kidnappings, even murder for hire. Drug dealers are easy targets for the Death Squad. No dealer will press charges for stolen drugs, especially if they don't survive the robbery.
Every meeting that we had with Victor just expanded more and more our investigation, because Victor was able to provide not just names of people that he personally knew within the department that were involved in committing crimes, but he knew of specific crimes that had been committed.
Victor tells agents what he knows about the murder of diamond dealer Stephen Brooks. He says the rogue officers of CIC were tipped off about the broker's arrival by the jeweler Brooks was to meet. They pulled the man over, knowing he was carrying lots of diamonds.
A police officer can stop you anywhere, can stop you on the street, ask you for your title of the car and everything, and that's what they practically did. I mean, they had the power to stop people.
The trained officers made sure there were no witnesses. Because the CIC investigated the homicide when it was later discovered, it was all too easy to cover up their crime. Victor's revelations disturbed the honest agents working the case.
These weren't men that were total strangers. I knew them. It was appalling. It was just appalling that these men had gone that far. Here were men who had raised their right hand and swore to uphold the law and serve and protect. And yet, if it had not been for their badges, they were totally indistinguishable from any other common criminal.
No matter how long it takes, the FBI and the NIE are determined to stop the Death Squad. In Puerto Rico, The FBI and NIE investigate a broad ring of crooked cops who call themselves the Death Squad. Special Agent Angelo Class leads the complex investigation.
The overall objective was to identify as many people involved in public corruption in Puerto Rico as we could, and then to identify crimes that they had committed and come up with the evidence to be able to prosecute them.
Detective Victor Sousa has cooperated, but agents need more for prosecution.
One of the first things we had to do was try to corroborate whether Victor was being honest with us or not. Trying to corroborate whether we were getting the truth and whether we were getting all the truth from Victor. So we decided to immediately wire him up and use a body recorder and send him up against some of the individuals.
Special Agent Jim Bird helps prep Victor for the wired meetings.
His mission was to engage in conversation people that we thought were involved in this. Maybe they would talk about future plans or talk about past crimes that they'd already committed. That's what we were hoping to get.
It's a dangerous assignment. If the corrupt cops suspect a double cross, they'll kill Victor.
He was going against other police officers, and he had to be careful. But because Victor was a police officer himself, he knew how far to go, how far to push, how provocative to be, and how to cover himself.
Victor starts with officers he already knows.
One of Victor's contacts was Julio Cesar, who had been the head of special arrests team for the police of Puerto Rico. Victor became close to him, hung out with him all the time, drank with him, socialized with him.
As Victor records Julio admitting to criminal acts, agents get probable cause to move to the next level of electronic surveillance.
We got enough evidence from conversations between Victor and Julio to wire up his car and get a wiretap on Julio's phone.
With the wiretap warrant, agents can listen to and record any conversation in which Julio discusses crimes. It's not easy, as the rogue cops protect themselves even on personal phone lines, according to Special Agent D. Rosario.
Many of the discussions were in code. They were not open conversations. So we had to really study a lot of people to find out, are they referring to this guy or to that guy? So there was a lot of analysis going on regarding that.
One of the detectives that Julio often talks to is Gil Valera. When Gil implicates himself, agents further expand their recording range.
We got enough probable cause to go on Gil's wire, and then from there, we identified other people they were involved with, and other things that they were doing and planning, shipping heist and shakedowns and other things.
FBI and NIE agents pair off to meticulously develop full cases on each crime discovered.
And they would run off with this particular case, which was a very significant case in itself, but it formed only a portion of the overall corruption case. So we were investigating 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 cases, if you will, at one time.
But so far, no one has admitted involvement in the killing of Jessica Trujillo. Investigators only have one suspect, the head of the Puerto Rican Police Homicide Division. Agents are determined to find the killer and solve the murder, which started the broad corruption case.
Her murder and the investigation of her murder opened up just a Pandora's box of individuals involved in not just murder for hire, extortion, kidnapping, fraud, bribery. It just ran the gamut of basically all the felonies that you can think of.
As Victor gets in deeper with the corrupt cops, they let him in on upcoming crimes. In February 1981, they discuss a murder for hire.
During a particular meeting, Julio brings up for the consideration of the group that he had been offered a contract to kill a journalist in the southern region of Puerto Rico.
Julio suggests that Victor be the triggerman, perhaps to test his allegiance to the group. Agents can't let a murder happen, but they don't want to jeopardize the case by arresting anyone too early.
It was finally decided that the best course of action was to contact the journalist directly, tell him that there was a threat on his life, that we were working on it, but that we needed him to be out of Puerto Rico and out of harm's way.
The journalist disappears for a month.
Which gave us enough time to then, through Victor, convince Julio and the rest of the group that killing a journalist was not a good idea. In fact, it was a stupid idea. And the amount of heat that it would bring down upon them and others would be untenable for them. And they really should rethink this contract thing. And that's exactly what happened.
Convinced that killing the journalist would bring too much publicity, Julio calls off the hit. Every word is recorded, helping to build the case.
We had microphones inside Victor's car. So whenever anyone was in his vehicle, we also would record their conversations inside his vehicle.
Despite months of investigation, agents are far from their ultimate goal, to arrest and convict every corrupt officer.
Victor just didn't have access to all of the people that we needed to get information out of. There were still huge holes. We were just barely beginning. And for those of us who were involved, we knew this. We knew this was going to be a long-term deal. And we had no illusions that it was going to be quickly resolved.
One of the players Victor is not close to is Detective Alejo Del Monte, head of the CIC. Agents believe he is the most powerful man in the organization and the most untouchable.
He was an extremely intelligent man. And as far as being an investigator, was perhaps one of the best, if not the best, homicide investigator that they ever had in that police department. That was who he was.
Still, agents vow to dismantle the death squad, from the foot soldiers all the way to the top. In Puerto Rico, the 1980 murder of Jessica Trujillo prompts an FBI investigation into a ring of crooked cops. As agents learn of alleged crimes, case agent Angelo Class holds off on making individual arrests.
And there were so many people involved that it would have been good for that particular case, but it would have been detrimental to the overall objective, which was to identify as many people as we could that were involved in corruption in Puerto Rico.
Special Agent Jim Bird.
The other thing was, we still didn't have enough to make an arrest in the Jessica murder, or in any of the other murders or other suspicious activity that we thought could be tied back into police corruption. We just weren't there yet.
Detective Victor Sousa is turned informant against the death squad. In April 1981, he learns the group intends to rob the Puerto Rico Power Authority. As a diversion, they plan to detonate a bomb at the back of the complex, then storm the front office. The hit is scheduled for when the most cash is on hand, according to NIE Special Agent Manuel Aponte.
They somehow had the insight that at that time there was going to be a lot of money there and wanted to go over there before the armored cars come to pick up the money.
Fearing that somebody was going to go in with guns blazing and take over this place, we had to intervene.
But agents can't reveal their investigation. They have to use stealth for fear of tipping off the cops. They need to come up with a ruse. On the day the strike is to take place, Victor covertly contacts the FBI and tells them it's going down. Agents call the Power Authority and tell them about the bomb threat. As the death squad moves out, so do dozens of regular officers to search for a bomb.
When they got there, the place was crawling with cops, so they didn't pull it off. And so we'd won one victory on that one crime for at least we bought one day.
After more than a year, agents have good cases on several members of the death squad. But they still have nothing on Alejo Del Monte, the gang's alleged leader. Then, Victor announces a big break.
We were informed that Julio Seis had invited Victor to travel down to Caguas, a nearby town, and meet with Alejo, which is a big breakthrough for us. We wanted Victor to try to get a recording of Alejo. Hopefully they'd be talking about some kind of corrupt activity.
From what I see here,
Victor wants to record the meeting, but agents worry Alejo will find any wire.
Victor had gotten so comfortable with wearing that body recorder that he actually fought us on it. He argued. He wanted to wear the body recorder. And we won out. Basically, we just said, no, you're not going to wear this body recorder.
In December 1981, Victor and Julio travel to Alejo's home. Though Victor cannot record the meeting, agents need him to witness Alejo discussing criminal acts. As predicted, Alejo is cautious of a wire and discreetly pats down Victor.
What Alejo was trying to do was to find out a body recorder.
Thankfully, this night, there is none.
If he had been wearing the body recorder, he would have been found out that same night.
Alejo takes Julio inside to talk in private. Victor and his handlers fear he's been made as an informant. The fear is verified on the way home.
Went in their car back to San Juan. He mentioned, you know what Alejo told me? That you may be working with the federal government. And that was the first time that we heard that Victor had probably been made.
Victor tries his best to convince Julio he can be trusted. But soon agents learn it didn't work.
It was around Christmas of 1981, and we had a wiretap ongoing. In one of the conversations we overheard, we learned that plans were well developed to have Victor murdered because they knew that he was cooperating with us.
Investigators call Victor in to tell him it's over.
And I remember Victor didn't want to come out. He wanted to keep on getting evidence against all these cops.
We played that tape for him, and he dropped his head and realized that it was all over, that he and his family were going to have to leave.
Agents whisk Victor and his family out of Puerto Rico and into the witness protection program before the death squad can get to him. When Victor stops answering his phone, the rogue cops will surely know some sort of investigation is going on. They'll be less likely to talk and tougher to crack. Still, the investigation continues.
We had, by this time, developed some additional sources within the police department who maybe were not as prolific in terms of the information that they could provide like Victor could, but certainly they provided enough information that led us to actually conduct further investigations.
Agents need real evidence against the most dangerous corrupt officer, Alejo Del Monte.
We had this information about Alejo, not only by Victor, by some other cops, that he was the coordinators of these crimes, especially committing murder against jewelers and contract to kill people. So Alejo was our target.
So far, they have nothing solid against the leader Alejo, but they are about to get it. September 1st, 1982, 2 years into the investigation. Mario Ramirez is driving home after work from his father's jewelry store. He has no idea his world is about to come crashing down. In September 1982, a group of armed men abduct Mario Ramirez in San Juan, Puerto Rico. That night, Mario's father receives a call. The man on the line says they've kidnapped Mario for a $500,000 ransom. He says he'll call again with instructions, and they'll kill Mario if anyone calls the police. For hours, the family struggles with what to do. Then Mario's father calls his neighbor, FBI Special Agent Angelo Class.
It just so happens that the victim and his father lived across the street from me and were personal friends of mine.
Class comes over right away, sneaking in a back door. Hearing what happened, Class calls for additional agents and tells them to park on side streets and slip in unnoticed.
We had to be careful because I suspected that the bad guys would be watching Mario's house.
As the team gathers, they discuss the case. Earlier, a confidential source reported Alejo Del Monte planned to kidnap a jeweler's son. Special Agent Jim Bird teaches the family to extend future calls long enough for a trace and to elicit details of where Mario might be.
We try to coach them before the call comes in. Okay, next time he calls, what are you going to say? What are we going to do? What's the plan?
What they don't tell the family is that if the death squad is responsible, Mario may never come home.
We thought from the very beginning that based on what we knew about the people involved, that Mario most likely was going to be killed, whether they got the money or not. The chances that he would survive this ordeal were not great.
Over several days, calls come in recorded by the FBI. Stalling for time, Mario's father says he can't come up with all the money. The caller lowers the ransom to $224,000 in cash and jewelry. Mario's father tries to keep the man on the line, but the kidnapper knows exactly when to end each call. With traces impossible, agents search for other ways to find the kidnappers.
We want to look for any kind of clue. Is there traffic in the background? Are there night noises of the Puerto Rican mountains in the background? We want to find out as much as we can about the situation by listening to these tapes over and over again.
As they listen in, they come to a remarkable conclusion.
The people that were reviewing the phone calls after we received them, that knew Alejo personally, said, "That's Alejo's voice." They thought that was him on the phone.
Agents set up covert surveillance of Alejo and the other corrupt cops.
Alejo, being a lieutenant colonel in the police department, he would know that he was being surveilled, so we had to do it very quietly.
On the fourth night, a final call comes in. FBI Special Agent Fernando Candelario is listening in.
An individual with a unique voice was on the line. He was very specific as to where he wanted the family to drop the money off. He described a bridge off the Caguas Expressway.
The caller says the money and jewelry should be placed in a pillowcase and dropped into the grass by the bridge. The drop must be made in 1 hour. No cops, no FBI.
We began a trace. That was unsuccessful at that point because the call was too short. This individual was pretty sharp. He seemed to know exactly what he wanted to say and how long he wanted to take to say what he needed to say.
Agents know the death squad has killed other kidnapped victims. But Mario's family prays that this time the ransom will be enough to save an innocent young man. The FBI and Puerto Rico's NIE believe a gang of rogue cops known as the Death Squad have kidnapped Mario Ramirez. On September 4th, 1982, agents surveil the ransom drop site, a bridge outside San Juan. According to NIE Special Agent Manuel Aponte.
We had a couple agents nearby that place, and they sneaked down to that road, far away, and just stayed over there in the bushes.
Mario's father heads to the site with the ransom, protected by an armed agent hiding in his car. FBI Special Agent Fernando Candelario helps coordinate the rescue attempt.
We had an aircraft in the air to assist. You'd be surprised how quiet the plane could be. This was at night. We could fly with lights out, so the kidnapper's not even going to see the plane in the sky.
Dozens of agents conduct ground surveillance, trying to remain invisible. With everyone in place, Mario's father makes the drop by the bridge as instructed. Agents now wait for the pickup. Soon the pilot spots a vehicle approaching.
The plane observes the vehicle park near the bridge. An individual exits the vehicle. The individual apparently found what he needed to find, the package containing the money. Returned to his vehicle and drove away.
Special Agent Jim Bird.
At that point, the car is driving down the highway. We have a plane, we have ground units trying to follow this individual who has the $224,000. We still don't know where the victim is.
Special Agent Angelo Class has run the police corruption case for 2 years.
We didn't know who the subjects or the people were inside the car. So we asked one of our agents to drive by it and take a quick look. So he drives by and he says, you're not gonna believe this, he says on the radio. It's Alejo himself.
As investigators watch from a distance, the leader, Alejo, switches to another car. The plane follows the original car. Ground agents trail Alejo. No one knows which car holds the ransom, but that's the least of their worries.
The primary goal is to rescue the victim, even if we have to lose the ransom. When the vehicle starts moving, we don't want everybody behind the subject. You don't want to get so close that you're going to burn the surveillance that may cause them to kill the victim.
As Alejo pulls into his own neighborhood, agents decide not to let him get to a phone.
We thought if we arrested Alejo, that the others wouldn't have a motive to kill Mario anymore because it would be Alejo to give the order to kill him.
At the suspect's house, the agents move in.
FBI, let me see your hands.
Special Agent D. Rosario calls in a warning.
Put your hands up.
I got on the radio and I said, be careful. He always carries an Uzi.
Ignoring agents' instructions, Alejo makes a move like he's going for a gun. An NIE agent fires a warning shot.
But it went so close to his face that it actually popped his eardrum, and his ear started bleeding.
Agents find no ransom in the car and no sign of Mario. A search of Alejo's house turns up no other evidence. Then, the surveillance plane loses contact with the other car. It seems a total loss.
Well, we have a colonel from the police of Puerto Rico being arrested for kidnapping charges. We don't have a victim, and we don't have a ransom.
Baker 4, any sign?
Mario is still out there, somewhere. Agents try to get Alejo to crack and tell them where the victim is held.
None of that happened. It was simply, you got the wrong guy. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a lieutenant colonel of the police of Puerto Rico. You've made a big mistake.
Agents scramble to find any of the other suspects.
We went up and down streets in Caguas and the suburbs looking for the cars we had identified with these criminals.
Hours pass. Hope begins to fade. And then...
Mario was left on the side of the road near San Juan. Called his house from a public telephone booth and said, "I've been released." And we picked him up and brought him back in.
It seems that once Alejo was arrested, the other kidnappers got nervous and released Mario. Finally, he is home.
I had never seen grown FBI agents cry. That's how emotional it got. And at that point, no one really cared whether we had recovered that ransom or not. It was important that we got him back.
With Alejo in custody, it's time to take everyone else down. A federal judge returns indictments on 32 people, mostly corrupt officers. Agents quickly take them into custody. Homicide Chief Emeterio Benitez cooperates and finally tells investigators the details of Jessica Trujillo's murder, the crime that started it all. The drug lord she was to testify against paid $20,000 for the hit. According to Emeterio, he and Gil Barrera picked her up that night and decided to kill her on the way to her grandmother's house.
As they were driving through the cane fields out there in that rural part of the island, without any warning, bam! Gunshot is fired.
Gil shot her from the back seat.
And a moment later, bam! Another gunshot goes off. They stopped, took her out, threw her in the sugarcane field, and drove off.
Later, Emeterio realized Jessica had playfully pinned his own police ID on her shirt. He went back and retrieved his ID, though he missed his Panama hat. Such an audacious murder, shooting a young girl wearing the chief's hat and ID in a police car, shows how untouchable the death squad thought they were.
This was done without any planning on who was going to pull the trigger, or where it was going to take place, or what were they going to do with the body. He just shot her, driving in the head of homicide's police vehicle.
The 2-year investigation is the biggest police corruption case in Puerto Rico's history. Most of the officers plead guilty, and all receive sentences ranging from 8 years to life.
That's reprehensible. What could be worse than somebody with a charge, an affirmative duty to protect citizenry, and they're out blowing their brains out for money?
Today, the police of Puerto Rico is a different institution. The rebel CIC division has been disbanded, and the citizens of Puerto Rico can once again trust the men and women sworn to protect them. One by one, prostitutes die across Central Europe. Austrian authorities believe one man is responsible. But they have no experience hunting serial killers. They turn to an FBI profiler for help. He finds the same killer has come to America, and the death count keeps rising until the FBI stops him.
Beginning in 1990, Europe found itself in the clutches of a serial killer. He became an international outlaw, hopping from country to country to evade capture and to kill again. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Legal cooperation between countries and continents is not common, but neither are serial killers in Europe. Desperate to apprehend him, Austrian authorities called on the FBI for help.
In Austria, the exchange of sex for money has been legal for years. Here, prostitutes walk the streets for men willing to pay for their services. Throughout most of the 1980s, Heidemarie Hammerer worked in the city of Bregenz as a prostitute. A licensed professional for almost 10 years. She was used to unusual requests. But on the night of December 5th, 1990, a customer went too far. The killer hurriedly redressed his victim. Then he dragged her through a secluded forest some 10 miles away and left her body. The crime went undiscovered for 3 weeks. On the morning of New Year's Eve, 1990, a pair of hikers stumbled upon Hammerer's body. Though the body had been left exposed to the elements, the winter temperatures helped preserve the remains. Austrian authorities determined that Hammerer had been strangled with her own pantyhose. Her wrists were bruised from restraints. At the autopsy, they found no sexual discharge on her body. But they did find fibers that were inconsistent with her clothing. She was only the first victim. Over the next several months, 3 more prostitutes died violently throughout Austria. Brunhilde Masser was recovered in a stream bed near Graz. Elfriede Schrempf, also from Graz, was found nearby in the woods. Near Vienna, Sylvia Zagler was discovered in a stand of trees. The women had all been bruised, strangled with their pantyhose, and left in various states of undress, lying face down in wooded areas. The Austrian public was shocked. On April 4th, 1991, the authorities gathered their most experienced investigators to focus on the slayings. Because of the similarities in the 4 cases, investigators reasoned that one person was responsible. Austria had its first serial killer in modern history. They had no experience investigating these offenders. Dr. Ernst Geiger, one of Austria's leading detectives, was assigned to coordinate the hunt.
No lead was promising. All the leads ended nowhere. We had no real suspect.
The first break came when a retired policeman read of the murders in a Salzburg newspaper. They reminded him of a case he solved in 1974. Detective Geiger received a phone call from the retired officer. 15 years earlier, he told Geiger, a young woman had been strangled with one of her undergarments and dumped in the woods. Just like the present victims. The killer was caught and convicted, but had recently been paroled. Detective Geiger took the name of the ex-convict, Johann Jack Unterweger.
Jack Unterweger was paroled after 15 years because he had murdered a young girl before, and while he was in prison, he became a writer, quite a famous writer.
But was it possible that this famous writer could be a serial killer? Geiger and his team began looking into the journalist's background. Until 1990, Jack Unterweger had led a difficult life. He was born to a German prostitute who quickly abandoned him. He suffered neglect and abuse, shuttling between various foster situations. As a teenager, Jack began to play out the rage of his dismal childhood. By age 25, that fury earned Unterweger a life sentence. Unterweger continued his education and started writing while in prison. He published letters, plays, short stories, and an autobiography. In the book that became a bestseller, Unterweger painted a tragic tale of himself as victim. Critics and the public alike embraced the author for the apparent honesty with which he confronted his past. The literary community suggested that art had redeemed him. Eventually, the press and the public at large demanded that his life sentence be commuted. On May 12, 1990, Austrian authorities agreed. The 40-year-old Austrian walked out of prison. He was a free man, determined never to spend another minute of his life behind bars. Shortly after his release, he was hired by a major German magazine to cover the prostitute murders. He promised to use his writing in a socially conscious way. He told his editor that he wanted to give voice to the dispossessed, caught in the underbelly of society, as he once was. By July 1991, after 2 more prostitutes were found strangled, psychologist Tom Mueller of Austria's Criminal Investigation Division joined the team.
When we started the investigation against Jack Unterweger, it was pretty hard because all his friends were within the media and they couldn't understand that he could be the bad guy.
Even among investigators, only a handful considered this celebrity journalist a possible suspect. Through receipts and travel records, Geiger and Mueller learned that Unterweger had been at each murder location. This was not suspicious in itself, since he was covering the story as an investigative journalist. Yet he always reached those destinations before the murders took place. Investigators also discovered that Unterweger had visited Prague in September 1990, just before a Czechoslovakian woman, Blanka Bokova, was strangled with her pantyhose. She was the earliest victim in the string of murders that now totaled 7.
And what was outstanding for us, that exactly at any time where Czech hang out at any place in Prague, in the western part of Austria, in the southern part of Austria, exactly in that time period there was always a dead body somewhere in the woods.
In Austria, another woman, Regina Prem, had been missing for months and presumed dead. Her family waited desperately for news of her fate. In October of 1991, the grief-stricken husband and son received a chilling phone call to their unlisted number. The caller told him that he was Regina's killer and described what she was wearing the night she disappeared. The caller claimed that he was the executioner, that God ordered him to do it, that she was left lying on the place of sacrifice with her face turned towards hell. The phone call was cruel torture to an already traumatized family. When police recovered her body, they confirmed Regina Prem was the killer's 8th victim to date. The discovery put them no closer to stopping the killer. Vienna, October 22, 1991. Austrian authorities questioned Unterweger for the first time. With no hard evidence to connect him to the crimes, they hoped for a confession. He admitted to consorting with prostitutes for his writing assignments and for sex. But he denied knowing the victims. Although his alibis were weak, investigators were forced to release him. Their evidence was merely circumstantial, and his public support was growing. But Mueller and Geiger still believed Unterweger was a strong suspect and continued digging into his past. They tracked down the car Jack drove when he was first released from prison. But it had been a year since he sold it, and the likelihood of finding any usable evidence was slim. The team uncovered little, except a hair fragment.
It's good. It's good.
Although it was a long shot, investigators sent the hair fragment to the University of Bern for analysis. Enough of the hair root remained for lab technicians to extract a DNA sequence. That sequence was compared to those of the victims. Of the 8 women slain, the DNA from the hair matched the earliest victim from Prague, Blanka Bokova, killed in September 1990. It was a breakthrough. But that only proved the woman was in the car when Jack owned it. Investigators needed stronger evidence. Now back at police headquarters, Geiger questioned Austrian prostitutes. They recognized Unterweger as a regular customer who insisted they wear handcuffs during sex. More importantly, one recalled seeing him approach her friend, Heide Marie Hammerer, the first victim discovered in Bregenz. She also remembered he wore a brown leather jacket on that night. On the strength of this identification and the hair fragment found in his car, Geiger obtained a warrant to search Unterweger's apartment.
Jack, Unterweger? Polizei!
When the police arrived, Unterweger was nowhere to be found. They took away clothing, including a brown leather jacket for forensic examination. Then one of the detectives discovered some receipts in a trash can. They were from a seafood restaurant in Malibu, California, dated 9 months earlier. Jack Unterweger had been to the United States. But the apartment search yielded less than the investigators had hoped. They found no hard evidence that directly tied Unterweger to the slayings. Since their case was still too weak to issue an arrest warrant, the investigation stalled. Jack Unterweger was still one step ahead. To stop him, Geiger needed help from those more experienced with catching serial killers. He needed the FBI. The Austrian investigators visited the U.S. Embassy. They met with legal attaché Julianne Slisko, an FBI agent stationed in Vienna.
I'm hoping you could help us with the FBI.
Slisko called the criminal profiling unit in Quantico, Virginia.
Hi, Agent McCrary.
She was patched through to Special Agent Greg McCrary.
Killings here in Austria.
Now retired, McCrary spent the last 10 of his 25 years in the FBI, pioneering the science of profiling.
The Austrians contacted the FBI because they were trying to tap into our experience of dealing with serial homicide investigations. This was the first serial murder investigation in modern history in Austria.
McCrary agreed to assist the Austrians. He would help them determine if one perpetrator could have committed all the murders. When Geiger told Slisko that Unterweger had traveled to L.A. the previous summer, she authorized a telex to be sent to California to inform local authorities. Over the next several days, Geiger and Mueller prepared for their trip to the FBI, packing crime scene reports, autopsy protocols, and photos. Then they received a call from LA detective Fred Miller. Miller had received their telex and said that California had suffered a similar pattern of killings during the prior summer. Now investigators turned their attention to LA, 6,000 miles away, in the hunt for the Austrian serial killer. By the fall of 1991, 8 women had been found dead in Central Europe. The prime suspect was Austrian celebrity writer Jack Unterweger. But little forensic evidence tied him to the crimes. And the public believed the police were pursuing an innocent man. An FBI telex from Vienna to California caught the attention of Los Angeles detective Fred Miller. He and his partner, Jim Harper, had been working for months on a series of unsolved murders. In style and pattern, the LA crimes resembled the ones that Unterweger was suspected of in Austria.
This immediately lit the fires, and it was just unbelievable to go all these 8 months and without the suspect turning up or another murder. This was quite a boost to the investigation.
The American and Austrian investigators compared notes. The cases were clearly similar. The victims were prostitutes. All had been strangled using intimate apparel, and all the bodies were left in remote locations. Now, Miller and Harper began to reconstruct Unterweger's visit to California. They checked the airlines, car rental agencies, and hotel logs. From these, they created a timeline of his movements.
We learned that he came to Los Angeles in June of '91 on vacation, right around June the 2nd or 3rd, and that he left around the 17th of July.
In the summer of 1990, Unterweger visited LAPD headquarters.
I'm a journalist, and I am interested.
He strolled into the public relations office, presented his press credentials, and signed up for the Ride-Along program.
And the Austrian police.
This program allows civilians to tag along with police in their cruisers as they patrol the city.
Tonight at 8:30 p.m.
As all Jack's credentials were in order, the request was accepted.
It's Jack Unterweger.
Unterweger claimed he was writing a German magazine story, contrasting American and European prostitution. He asked to be shown where the city's prostitutes hung out. The officers introduced him to the seedier areas of Los Angeles. Detective Jim Harper explains.
I mean, if you come to a city as big as Los Angeles, you know, prostitutes don't hang out everywhere. You gotta know where they hang out. What better way to do that than get a ride along with the police department?
Witnesses last saw 21-year-old Shannon Exley in the vicinity of 7th Street and Main Street.
What's that you're saying?
She had been working the streets since she'd run away from home at 16. Her life ended on June 20th, 1991. Her nude body was found with her bra wrapped around her neck. Marks on her feet told investigators she had already been strangled when she was dragged some 50 feet to where she was found.
The lacerations across her neck.
Medical technicians were able to isolate DNA sequences from the semen of 7 men. But LA detectives had no suspects with whom they could compare the samples. 10 days later, investigators discovered a second prostitute, Irene Rodriguez. She was found behind a tractor trailer, only a mile and a half from where Exley's body had been dumped. Both women had been strangled with their bras, and both were last seen in the vicinity of 7th and Main Street. The detectives discovered that Unterweger was living nearby.
We learned that he stayed at the Cecil Hotel, which is located at 643 South Main, which is right on the corner of 7th and Main Street, and that's the location where, close proximity where both our victims were last seen.
A third victim, Sherry Long, was found near Malibu less than 2 weeks later. Once again, Unterweger was staying at a hotel in the vicinity Long was last seen. Around her neck, her bra was tied tightly. Detective Jim Harper remembers the unique method of strangulation.
The way the bras were tied around their neck was nothing that I had seen before. It looks to me took a lot of intricate time to really take time with the victim and put it around their necks and tie it.
Los Angeles criminalist Lynn Harold compared the knots to see if there was a pattern in the way each had been made and tied.
In order for the knots to be made, the wearing apparel had to be dismantled in some form. It's not like the bras were just taken and tied in a square knot, but they were stripped of the elastic always on the left side. And if 3 people randomly went out and strangled 3 people, it is extremely unlikely that all 3 of them would come up with this same scenario.
Now Geiger and Mueller added the information from the Los Angeles murders to their own case and headed to Virginia. They hoped that the FBI could determine whether one man had indeed killed all 11 women. Back in Austria, Jack Unterweger maintained a high profile.
Guten Abend.
The celebrity journalist continued to publish his articles and appeared on television to talk about the murders. He told audiences that the Austrian police were inept at finding the real killer and had singled him out as a scapegoat. Unterweger claimed that the authorities were determined to send him back to prison, even if that meant framing him for the grisly crimes. Unterweger remained popular with the public at large and in the nightclubs where he was a regular. To his fans, and especially women, he was still charming. He boasted the police had no evidence, only theories. And they would never be able to send him back to prison. In August 1992, Austrian detectives arrived at Quantico, Virginia. They needed an experienced FBI profiler to help them capture the serial killer that had left 11 women dead in Central Europe and California. The Austrians came with 12 boxes of evidence.
Report on that.
Special Agent Greg McCrary refused to look at any information on the prime suspect, Jack Unterweger. He didn't want any preconceived notions to interfere with his analysis. Instead, McCrary wanted to focus on the victims.
I wanted all the case materials on all of the homicides, victimology, a lot about the victims and their background, their history, the method and manner of death, autopsy reports, crime scene photos, everything that was available from an investigative point of view. What we didn't want is suspect information. We just wanted to take an objective look at all of the cases to see what we thought, if they might be related or not, and the type of offender that we thought might be most probably involved in committing these crimes.
Let's get to work.
McCrary did not presuppose that the crimes were linked. He examined the similarities among the cases to see if they were unusual enough to have been committed by one perpetrator. He began to look for a behavioral thumbprint, a criminal signature in each of the murders.
A signature crime analysis is an assessment of the behavioral aspects of the crime, which can in some cases be a single event, but more often it's a constellation of behaviors that are consistent from crime to crime to crime. And this allows us to link crimes together behaviorally based on the behavior of the offender.
Could you push this one back? Yes.
McCrary looked for patterns. He examined everything known about the 11 women. How similar were their lifestyles? Almost all the women were prostitutes, except for the first woman slain in Prague.
Mr. McCrae, this is a map of Vienna.
A companion last saw Blanka Bokova on September 14, 1990, leaving a bar in Prague, Czechoslovakia. Bokova worked as a sales clerk at a butcher shop, but was known to trade sex for favors. Her body was left on the bank of the Vlatva River in a stretch of woods near Bokova's home. The killer had strangled her with her own nylon stockings. He left her naked, covered with sticks and twigs. He threw her clothes and identification in the river.
Very characteristic.
The first victim Austrian police found had been a registered prostitute for 10 years, Heide Marie Hammerer. In the early part of her career, she had suffered several violent attacks from customers, so she was known to be cautious. Hammerer was last seen outside a parking garage on December 5, 1990. Like the first 5 victims, Hammerer was found in the woods close to water. They all had restraint bruises on their arms and wrists. And autopsies found no semen on any of the European victims. To the profiler, this suggested that the killer struck out of impotence. He was terribly insecure about his masculinity. When he could not perform after being sexually stimulated, the killer lashed out in anger. He strangled the women he blamed for shaming him. Then he left their bodies in humiliating positions. Next, they focused on the LA murder victims. Did they fit the pattern that had been established in Europe? Shannon Exley was found face down in a grassy area near a freeway exit. She was nude except for a t-shirt and a pair of socks. She had been dragged 50 feet from the pavement to the location where she was discovered, after being strangled with her brassiere. Again, this crime, like the others in LA and Europe, showed the killer had preferences and that the violence itself had become erotic to him.
It became clear that there was a pattern to these homicides, that there was sort of a ritualistic behavior that occurred in each of these crime scenes. Each woman was similar in nature, either a prostitute or a woman who traded sex for favors. They were on the street when they were contacted, when they were picked up, usually very surreptitiously. No one really saw these women get into a car. They were transported out to an area. They were murdered, ligature strangled with an article of their own clothing, disposed in a similar manner in an outdoor setting, absence of sexual assault.
All right, roughly from where she was last
After a week, the study of the victimology convinced McCrary that there had indeed been only one killer behind the 11 homicides. The FBI agent and the Austrian detective spent the following week drawing up a profile of the assailant. The evidence suggested the killer had a good degree of mobility. He was older, intelligent, sophisticated, and an organized offender. To criminal psychologist Tom Mueller, this described Jack Unterweger.
I would say Jack was a very, very good example for a typical type of organized offender, and I would say he was a typical example for a natural psychologist. He was able to understand the needs of other people. He was able to come close to other people, to listen to other people, and then to manipulate them.
But the geography worked against the theory that there was one killer. The murders had occurred in Czechoslovakia, Austria, and Los Angeles. With minor exceptions, most serial killers stay regional and prey within a comfort zone. But enough time had elapsed between the slayings to permit one culprit to move around. Now the profiler compared Unterweger's travels to the chronology of the murders.
And when I overlaid Jack Unterweger's timeline on the timeline of the crimes, they fit perfectly. And that was really a dawning moment, the aha moment, the moment that's really exciting in analysis like this, because now you have a suspect whose movements correlate perfectly with each of the homicides, as well as his prior homicide that he had been convicted for, bearing a lot of similarities to these homicides. We can put him in each place at each time these crimes occurred. And either Jack Unterweger was the unluckiest man in the world to have been there, or he was an excellent suspect.
In Austria, Unterweger continued to enjoy his freedom and notoriety. Some women still found him appealing, even though the former convict was a prime murder suspect. This perplexed Detective Fred Miller.
One of the interesting facets of Jack Unterweger was that he could carry on a normal relationship with a female and still be this cruel and murder other females.
High school student Bianca Mrak was one of those that fell under his charm. The impressionable 18-year-old met Unterweger in a wine bar where she worked as a waitress. She was flattered by the attention from the celebrity writer. He told her he was tiring of all the publicity in Austria and might leave the country, maybe to Switzerland. She agreed to go with him wherever he went. August 1992. Agent Greg McCrary of the FBI worked with Austrian detectives to solve a series of 11 murders. 8 women were killed in Central Europe, 3 more in Los Angeles. All circumstantial evidence pointed to celebrity journalist Jack Unterweger as the culprit. Then they received a phone call from the University of Bern. Austrian lab technicians had completed the fiber analysis of clothing confiscated from Unterweger's apartment weeks before. The inspection had yielded results. Fibers from the lining of the brown leather jacket matched those on the body of Heide Marie Hammerer, the first prostitute found. It was hard forensic evidence that tied Unterweger to one of the victims. But investigators wanted to conclusively link the suspect to all the victims. The FBI had another tool that could do just that, VICAP, the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. The computer database holds the details of 10,000 solved and unsolved U.S. homicides. A programmer inputted the particulars of the European and Los Angeles cases. Details of the victims, their manner of death, locations where they disappeared, and where they were found were all fed into the computer. McCrary ordered an extensive breakdown, a multi-dimensional search with 15 cross-criteria that could show if the crimes were connected.
I certainly will, Mr. McCrary.
48 hours later, the detectives were called back to the VICAP room to hear the answer. The results were stunning. The computer statistically linked all 11 slayings. Jack Unterweger was the killer. The FBI had given the Austrians solid proof for their case. But Unterweger was still at large. The Austrian detectives immediately returned to Vienna. Armed with the FBI profile, authorities issued an arrest warrant for Johann Jack Unterweger. Again, the police descended upon the writer's residence. But Jack was gone. He had abandoned his flat. Geiger called his office and ordered his team to check all of Austria's ports of exit. Within hours, all train stations and airports were canvassed. but they found no sign of Unterweger. The serial killer was gone. Unterweger had already fled with Bianca Merak beyond the reach of Austrian authorities.
Jack Unterweger is a very good representative of an intelligent psychopath. He became an award-winning author and playwright, but psychopaths are very, very manipulative, and they have a supreme ability to con other people.
Hallo? Hallo? Ja. Ja, ich bin hier.
On a stop in Paris, Jack called into television shows and protested his innocence.
Ja, ist obvious.
He said his flight was not an admission of guilt, but an attempt to evade a frame-up by the police. He promised to return to Austria and answer all questions if the arrest warrant was withdrawn. Despite his media appearances, the Austrian police had no idea where Unterweger was hiding. In Vienna, investigators interviewed Unterweger's friends. They were unfazed by the fact that he had been indicted for multiple murders. They said that Jack had run off for a holiday in America with Bianca Merak, a former waitress from the wine bar. Bianca was known to live with her mother, so Geiger paid a visit to Mrs. Merak.
Mit wem?
She acknowledged that she had been in contact with the fugitive couple, sending them money via wire transfers. They were in New York and heading down to Florida. Geiger told her to contact him if her daughter called again.
Okay, is ze calling?
Mrs. Merak agreed.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Just days later, she got a call from Miami. Her daughter needed more money. Mrs. Merak promptly informed the Austrian police. U.S. Marshals were waiting at the Western Union. The Marshals ID'd the couple as they drove up.
U.S. Marshals, you're under arrest. U.S. Marshals, you're under arrest.
Unterweger was quickly apprehended.
All right.
He was jailed in Miami to await extradition. Both the nation of Austria and the state of California wanted to prosecute him. LAPD Detective Fred Miller began conferring with his Austrian counterparts.
After Jack's arrest in Miami, we dealt almost on a daily schedule with the Austrian authorities, trying to put the information they had on their murders together with the information on the California murders. The Austrian authorities made trips to Los Angeles. They provided us with whatever materials we needed, photographs of the crime scenes, information on the victims, information on Jack.
2 miles.
The Austrians wanted to prosecute Unterweger in their court for all 11 murders. But they knew that would be difficult. The Austrian public perceived Jack as a celebrity.
How many miles is this whole map cover?
Detectives would have to convince them that Jack's private evil side was the reality. Special Agent Greg McCrary explains.
What's interesting with Jack, if you look at different pictures from different parts of his life, many times he's nattily attired with a bow tie and has this almost young, innocent-looking face. But then if you see him with his shirt off and you look at these really diabolical, involved prison tattoos that are typical of the more violent psychopathic offenders you have in prison, you see the dichotomy between Jack's outward appearance and the inner psychopathology becomes more apparent.
I've always tried to get to
The LAPD detectives obtained a search warrant for tissue samples from the prisoner. In Miami, a technician drew blood, took hair samples and swabs of saliva for DNA testing. The samples were sent back to a Los Angeles lab for analysis. His DNA matched that found in the semen from Shannon Exley. But Exley's body contained semen from 6 other men,
And what's her last name?
and there was no sexual discharge found in the other 2 LA prostitutes. Jack Unterweger worried that he would be transferred to California, where a death penalty was possible. He did not want to die in the gas chamber. But if he went back to Austria, he could be tried for the crimes on both continents. Criminal psychologist Tom Mueller explains.
If an Austrian citizen is committing a crime wherever in the world, the Austrian law is responsible for that guy. So the American authorities gave the clearance to bring Mr. Unterweger here back to Austria.
But Unterweger could delay this by fighting extradition.
How are we going to Austria?
You know, Jack.
LA detectives pressured him. They assured Unterweger that he would be found guilty in California and reminded him of the state's death penalty. Fearing the gas chamber,
I want to go
he
home. I
agreed
want
to
to go to
deportation.
You'll sign the extradition.
Despite the evidence, he still enjoyed popular support at home.
Let's go.
And Unterweger believed he could persuade a jury that the authorities were wrong. But the Austrians were betting on the FBI profile. When Jack Unterweger returned to his native Austria, he faced 11 counts of murder. 7 women were killed on Austrian soil, but the laws of the Central European country allow its citizens to be tried for crimes committed anywhere in the world. The murder indictment had done little to diminish the writer's support in the media. As he sat in jail awaiting trial, Jack continued to lobby the press that the police had framed him. His case saturated the news. In this highly charged environment, Austrian prosecutors prepared for trial. If they wanted to win, they had to present an airtight case. LAPD detective Jim Harper journeyed to Vienna for the trial.
The OJ case here in LA is the only thing I can kind of equate it to. It was that big over there. It was all over the newspapers, headlines. I mean, and when we came into this town to testify, it was a big deal. We were all over the front page of the paper, the whole deal.
The trial was held before a 3-judge tribunal. The prosecution argued their case with minimal physical evidence. They were counting on Agent McCrary's behavioral profile.
Could you say why there's so many different places?
So it became increasingly important to link these crimes together behaviorally. That really was the only way that Jack could be linked to this entire series of crimes. So that became the critical component in the prosecution of Jack, and where we were most able to assist the Austrian authorities.
Take them to a different spot.
McCrary related to the judges what he had deducted at Quantico. The killer always chose prostitutes, or those who traded sex for favors. He was criminally sophisticated, older, at least in his late 30s. He wasn't panicky nor disorganized. He possessed inner rage, but it was very controlled. The victims had bruises on their wrists as if they had been restrained with handcuffs. McCrary was convinced Unterweger would ask the prostitutes to wear them to fulfill his sexual fantasy. But it was about control. The killer wanted their hands secured to prevent them from resisting.
The bodies were found
McCrary's testimony linked the victims together.
to where they were laid.
Across 2 continents, the trail of deaths followed Jack Unterweger. Where he went, women died. While he visited Los Angeles, 3 prostitutes were murdered, and their slayings mimicked those in Europe. Shannon Exley and the other 2 American women were strangled to death. The offender used their brassieres as ligatures. And Unterweger tied the knots on the ligatures in exactly the same way as he had on the ones in Europe. McCrary pointed out that the probability was infinitesimal that more than one killer committed the crimes.
What are the chances that more than one offender would be not only choosing to ligature strangle a victim with an article of her own clothing, but he would tie the knots in exactly the same way? Very, very remote chance that we've had different offenders committing the crime in that manner.
But the defense argued there was a difference. The victims in Los Angeles had been strangled with their brassieres, and women in Europe had been strangled with their pantyhose. But McCrary countered that European prostitutes do not wear brassieres. What mattered to the killer was that he used an intimate article of the victim's clothing.
The prostitute, I'm sure that he was much more hurried.
LA criminalist Lynn Harold was asked to compare the knots from the pantyhose to those from the bras.
In the case of the pantyhose, you had one leg. The second leg was double backed on itself and used as the third segment for the weaving or braiding in a manner extremely similar to one of the bra cases where the two pieces of elastic formed two segments and the left strap was pulled through as the third braid.
In all, the trial lasted 2.5 months. On June 28, 1994, a jury in Graz, Austria, found Johann Jack Unterweger guilty of 9 of the murders. The remaining victims were found too badly decomposed to convict Unterweger beyond a reasonable doubt. The verdict meant life in prison to a man who swore he would never spend another day behind bars. And he never did. Unterweger strangled himself with a nylon cord stripped from his uniform.
We normally think of suicide as coming from depression or someone who feels shame or guilt or remorseful in some way. This is not at all what was going on when Jack committed suicide. More psychopathic offenders like Jack do it to exert control. And it's the last great defiant act that he exercised to wrest control of this situation away from the government, away from the authorities. He would not allow himself to be imprisoned for the rest of his life.
Jack Unterweger proved that serial killers are not just an American phenomenon. European law enforcement agencies realized that to fight criminals of this sort, they would have to follow the FBI's example.
What we learned out of their case was that in Austria and even in Europe, we didn't have a similar system like VICAP. Violent Crime Apprehension Program. The Criminal Psychology Service tried to get a similar system here to Austria, and therefore we can work with all sex crime cases and homicide cases.
Now, thanks to the lead of the FBI, many countries have adopted profiling and a computerized criminal database in the hopes that open borders and conflicting jurisdictions will no longer allow these predators to escape justice. For 30 years, Vincent Gigante wandered the streets of New York's Greenwich Village, dressed in a tattered bathrobe and babbling endlessly to himself. To the FBI, he was believed to be the boss of New York's most powerful mafia organization, the Genovese crime family. Was Gigante crazy, or was his behavior a shrewd attempt to disguise his position as a ruthless mafia boss? That question would take years to answer.
Every family has eccentrics, even crime families. Crime boss Vincent Gigante, head of New York's Genovese family, was undoubtedly eccentric. The question remained, was he truly mad? Justice rested on the answer. Outwardly, he roamed the streets as a doggedly old man, barely in touch with reality. But in the eyes of the law, he was a cunning conspirator and responsible for murder. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. Organized crime takes a concerted effort to crack. The FBI is devoted to cracking it. The case against Gigante hinged on his ability to stand trial. Was his strange behavior an act of madness or a stroke of genius?
Anyone who witnessed Gigante's ravings would have found it hard to believe that he controlled the largest and most profitable family in the New York Mafia, an organization with a long and bloody history. The origins of the Mafia can be traced back to 13th century feudal Sicilian society. Bands of Sicilian families organized themselves to rebel against the oppressive and ruthless French invaders. Mafia, the acronym for the Italian Morta alla Francia Italia Anela, which translates to death to the French is Italy's cry, became the name that these organized families used to refer to themselves, its meaning synonymous with men of honor. By the 19th century, the Mafia re-emerged in Sicily as a purely criminal culture, mostly hiring themselves out to wealthy landowners to oppress upstart peasants. More and more, the goal of the Mafia became focused on how to generate illegal profits. The tradition continued as waves of Italians emigrated to New York in the 1920s. Most immigrants lived in cramped and poor conditions. As a result of growing ethnic tensions, Sicilian Americans became the target of growing resentment. They needed Mafia protection more and more. Louis Scilero, a third-generation Italian-American, is head of the FBI's New York field office. A 23-year veteran, he is an expert on the Mafia and its intricate structure.
When they first became prevalent in New York City, it primarily victimized members of the immigrant community, where in lower Manhattan they became the victims of extortions and protection rackets. And that's how the Cosa Nostra families originally got their start.
With Prohibition, influence of the crime families grew out from the isolated neighborhoods and began to spread nationwide. A new form of underworld cooperation emerged. Various crime families across America banded together to supply illegal alcohol to a country willing to pay for it.
And I think that probably more than anything gave the Italian gangs, the Italian Cosa Nostra families, a foothold in American society, not only from an organizational standpoint, but certainly from a financial base. Since Prohibition, certainly they then expanded into other areas.
Operating outside the law meant the Mafia had to police itself. For an organization animated by self-interest and greed, there would always be conflict and opposition. An elite group of killers were organized to enforce Mafia rules, thereby ensuring its survival. This group of mob enforcers came to be known as Murder, Inc. By the early 1940s, Murder, Inc. would be responsible for hundreds of mob-related murders nationwide. The powerful New York bosses during the Mafia's early years, Lucky Luciano and Frank Costello, set up a ruling body for the Mafia, responsible for delegating territories and duties among the various gangs nationwide. Home for America's 5 largest families, New York remained the center of the Mafia's expanding foothold in America. It remains so to this day.
The 5 New York families consist currently of the Gambino family, the Bonanno, the Lucchese, the Colombo, and the Genovese family. Each of those families are also members of the Commission and also have their base in New York City.
The Commission, composed of the bosses of the 5 New York families, acts as a criminal board of directors, settling disputes between families and making major decisions on Mafia business. Each family is governed by its administration, comprised of the boss, the underboss, and the consigliere, or counselor, who are responsible for directing their family's criminal activity. Below the administration in the family hierarchy are the captains. The captains are the leaders of crews of soldiers, the men responsible for carrying out the day-to-day criminal activity. To become a soldier, properly known as a wise guy or good fella, an individual has to first be made or officially inducted into the secret society. He must blindly obey the rules of Cosa Nostra, Italian for this thing of ours. He is sworn to put the family ahead of all else. If he is asked to kill, he must faithfully do so. It was against this backdrop, a bustling immigrant community with an expanding Cosa Nostra influence, that Vincent Gigante grew up. His parents came from Naples and settled in Lower Manhattan. Vincent finished 8th grade and started trade school, but soon dropped out. Less than a decade later, Gigante became a wise guy in the Genovese crime family. Vincent Gigante's crime career spanned a turbulent time in American mafia history. The mob had expanded its reach into legitimate businesses, the various families fighting to control them. And in the ensuing turf wars, violence was often the final arbiter. The family that Gigante attached himself to was steeped in Cosa Nostra's American origins. The infamous Charles Lucky Luciano, responsible for organizing and structuring the American Mafia, was the family's first boss until he was imprisoned in 1936. As a result, Luciano's family administration, Frank Costello, nicknamed the Prime Minister of the Underworld, and Vito Genovese, fought for control of the family. Costello won out, but Vito Genovese began plotting his takeover. A young Vincent Gigante first gained notoriety as a mobster in 1957 when he attempted to murder Frank Costello. Within the mafia, it was widely believed that Vito Genovese had ordered the hit to get rid of his rival. Gigante's bullet only grazed Costello's head, but apparently Costello got the message. Soon after the shooting, he put out word that he was retiring. Vito Genovese was now the boss of the family that would take his name. Gigante was arrested for attempted murder and brought to trial, but the case was dismissed for lack of a witness. The location and angle of Costello's wound indicated he probably saw the would-be assassin, but at the trial, he failed to identify Gigante as the shooter. Even for an ousted boss, the oath of secrecy remained sacred. Gigante continued to make money for the Genovese family through illegal enterprises. 2 years after the failed assassination attempt, he was arrested and convicted of narcotics violations. He received a 7-year sentence. Convicted mobsters are expected to do their time and remain silent. If Gigante served his time and kept his mouth shut, he would be rewarded after his release. It was up to Gigante to figure out how to avoid future arrests. He was a model prisoner, neat, polite, and willing to take on any job. Gigante's cooperation was so impressive that some prison officials wrote glowing reports. He was released early from the federal penitentiary in Lewisburg for good behavior when he was 35 years old. Gigante now devised a secret plan that he hoped would prevent his return to prison forever. He didn't want to leave his mafia life or give up his shot at becoming the boss of the family. After his release in 1964, Gigante's public behavior began to grow bizarre. He became a frequent sight on the streets of Greenwich Village. Gigante could be found wandering the neighborhood, appearing disoriented and mentally unstable. Not long after he left prison, Gigante learned of a police investigation over his association with known mobsters. In 1969, he was indicted for attempting to bribe New Jersey police officers. Allegedly, he offered them money in exchange for information about surveillance and ongoing investigations in the Genovese family. Now at almost 40 years old, he returned to his mental disability as a foil and checked himself into a psychiatric hospital for the first time. To support his story, Gigante and his relatives began to revise his medical history. While Gigante was at Lewisburg, his mother had been required to fill out a detailed family history. She said Vincent was a healthy, happy child. She noted only a speech impediment and a slight heart murmur. He had been a boxer, but never had a serious injury. By the time of the 1969 indictment, however, Gigante's lawyers claimed he was not competent to stand trial. His family suddenly remembered a host of mental problems. He'd been given to severe temper tantrums. He had a phobia for the dark. He had been truant from school. He was at one time obese and had learning problems. The incompetency argument worked. Gigante never stood trial for the 1969 bribery charges. That same year, Gigante's boss, Vito Genovese, died of heart failure while serving a prison sentence for narcotics trafficking. In the decade that followed, the Genovese family was so secretive that for law enforcement, it was difficult to tell exactly who the boss was. Even had the FBI been able to identify the Genovese family leadership, making a case against them was another story. Witnesses were hard to come by. Mobsters who violated the sacred oath faced certain death. The best the FBI could do was to go after individual crimes. There were no laws that focused on bringing down the entire criminal family. As Gigante was moving up in the family, the federal government was about to make the FBI's job a little easier. In 1970, Congress passed the Racketeer Influences and Corrupt Organization Act, better known as the RICO laws.
What the racketeering law allowed us to do was to look at the family as a criminal enterprise and to attack the family as a criminal act. That became much more effective if you look back from the mid-70s to the 80s in terms of actually indicting the entire family and the entire hierarchy of that family.
The RICO laws require that the government prove that mafia families are essentially criminal enterprises. They must show that the crimes committed by the boss and members of his family are committed to either expand the criminal enterprise or to increase a family member's position within that enterprise. To successfully bring down a family, the government has to prove that any one of several criminal acts, ranging from racketeering and extortion to murder, has been committed. By 1979, now armed with federal legislation aimed directly at organized crime, the FBI had devoted teams to exclusively focus investigations on the 5 major families. The FBI's Genovese squad finally learned that Vincent Gigante was on a fast track with the family. Special Agent Richard Rudolph had been assigned to investigate the Genovese crime family.
Through informants and other law enforcement agencies who were exchanging information, we became aware that Mr. Gigante was an individual with much respect in the Genovese crime family and operated out of an area in Lower Manhattan. Because he was an up-and-coming person with a lot of respect within the family, we began to do some surveillances of Mr. Gigante.
With the FBI continuing to build its arsenal against organized crime, Gigante's cat and mouse game intensified. He stepped up his public show of mental disorder. In the late 70s and into the 80s, he was admitted 5 more times for psychiatric treatment. The FBI continued to keep tabs on Gigante. Agents learned that he frequented the Triangle Social Club, a gathering place for Genovese crime figures.
He could be found there almost on a daily basis. He lived in the neighborhood. He was an individual that could be found there in the late afternoons and into the early hours of the morning, and people would come to see him as opposed to him going to see other people.
Though Gigante's association in the Genovese family seemed certain to investigators, Gigante's family and doctors continuously told investigators that he led a very narrow existence. They said his whole world was confined to the block where he lived and the church he attended with his mother. He was barely functional at home and could not care for himself, they said. But with every passing day, the FBI and New York police were seeing a very different Vincent Gigante. In the early 1980s, the Mafia in the Northeast went through a particularly tumultuous time with several killings. Internal disputes within the family resulted in a string of assassinations. The FBI suspected Gigante was responsible for these gangland executions, especially those intended as punishment for breaking Cosa Nostra rules. Gigante was known to be a traditionalist. He wanted the rules obeyed, and when they were broken, retribution was sure to follow. It started with the murder of Philadelphia crime boss Angelo Bruno. Although Bruno's family was well outside New York, all families answered to the members of the commission. Gigante was upset because Bruno had been assassinated by his own men in a grab for control of the family. A Cosa Nostra rule had been violated. No one can kill a boss unless the commission sanctions it, and they seldom do. It was rumored that Gigante himself launched an investigation into Bruno's murder. Retribution was swift. Less than a month later, Tony Bananas Caponegro, identified as one of Bruno's assassins, was found dead. He had been shot 15 times and stabbed in the back. His body was stuffed in a trunk, and $20 bills were littered around his body, a clear message that he was killed for his greed. On the same day, another body was discovered. This time it was Fred Salerno, dead of gunshot wounds, dumped in a vacant lot. He too had allegedly participated in Bruno's murder. Phil Testa had taken Angelo Bruno's place as boss. His reign was short. Almost a year after Bruno's execution, Testa was blown up entering his own home. Another boss killed without the blessing of the commission. Another avenging act would follow. Rocco Marinucci was next, found dead with fireworks stuffed in his mouth. A gesture designed to show that he was killed for the way in which he had killed Testa. If the Cosa Nostra was to flourish, all of its members had to comply with its rules. There were no exceptions. Gigante was believed to have ordered the murder of one of his own crime family members. Genovese soldier Jerry Papa had murdered 2 Colombo family members without permission. As punishment for his unsanctioned act, he was brutally shot and killed by members of his own criminal family. Had Gigante become the enforcer for the Northeast Cosa Nostra? Informers within the mob told federal agents that all of these killings had been ordered by Gigante. But information given by admitted criminals is always a problem for potential juries. Criminals will say anything if their cooperation can be traded for a reduced prison sentence. The FBI needed more than the words of criminals looking for a deal. Gigante knew this, and he protected himself accordingly. It seemed that Gigante was now the boss. The FBI began a more focused surveillance effort on Gigante. They learned that the Genovese family had also infiltrated several of New York's major industries: the garment trade, trucking, garbage collection, airport cargo handling, and the city's seafood industry. Vincent Gigante was known on the streets as the Chin, an abbreviation of Cinzino, Little Vincent. Fearing FBI surveillance and wiretaps, family members were not allowed to speak his name. They were to refer to him with hand signals, touching their chins to communicate his nickname. Bringing down the chin was going to take every bit of know-how that the FBI could muster. They were going to have to create their own luck. As a surveillance team member watched one day, a telling crack in the chin's roof appeared. The seemingly frail man was being helped across a busy street. When oncoming traffic threatened, he became suddenly animated, racing to safety. His helplessness somehow overtook him again on the other side. Clearly, there were two gigantes, the mentally troubled one displayed to the public, and the determined boss of the Genovese administration. The FBI would soon learn of a third. Gigante's ex-wife and their 5 children lived in New Jersey while he maintained a relationship with his long-standing companion, Olympia Esposito. He usually called on her late at night, looking quite dapper before he was aware of the surveillance.
We learned that he frequently visited a townhouse which was located up on 77th Street and the east side of Manhattan, where we later learned that a common law, he was living with his common law wife, and he had been married previously, and this was his second family there at this residence.
Soon the FBI knew all of the Chin's hangouts. This gave surveillance teams an opportunity to observe Gigante without his knowledge. A major break came when NYPD Organized Crime Task Force member Detective Tom Bruno was able to snap photos of some of Gigante's activities.
In 1984, I was assigned to a joint organized crime task force. That task force consisted of FBI agents and New York City police officers, detectives, and we were assigned to investigate the Genovese crime family. Then the next step was to go to Sullivan Street, where Chin Gigante lived. His apartment was above a pet store, alleged pet store. And he also had a social club on the block. And when you'd go by the social club, you'd see numerous people that were in the photos. And you'd see them standing in front of, going inside, and then sometimes crossing the street, going to the pet store, which was where the Chin, we believe, met people. Pet store really never had any kind of business that we could see. It had a little cat box in the window, and basically that was it.
More and more, Gigante was seen acting normally when he was unaware he was being watched.
I see Chin Gigante and I see Andrew Gigante, which is his son, come out of his residence. And I'm just minding my business, walking up the block. Andrew leaves to get in his car, and Chin is standing on the corner, and he wasn't helped out of his building, and he was standing on the corner. Andrew gets in his car, pulls out. As he pulls out, there's a car coming up Sullivan Street. It blows the horn. Chin Gigante yells, "Hey, what are you, in a rush?" As he does this, I come into the lighted area. He looks, sees me, and all of a sudden his head goes down, and he plays the sick point.
Another break followed Detective Bruno's surveillance successes. The FBI managed to rent an apartment close to the townhouse of Gigante's companion, Ms. Esposito. An agent would exit through a back door in the rented apartment building and position himself about 50 feet from Ms. Esposito's townhouse. From there, Ms. Esposito and Gigante could be seen from time to time. An agent watched the couple for 4 months between midnight and 2 a.m. Assistant U.S. Attorney Andrew Weissman, who later would have to prove Gigante's competency to stand trial. was delighted with the agent's observations.
And lo and behold, when he was inside in a place where he didn't think he was being observed, he did all of the normal things that any of us would do. As a matter of fact, what was unusual about those surveillances was that there was nothing unusual about him. He was normal. He was talking to people. He was counting money. He never wore a shoddy bathrobe. Indeed, the only time he was seen in a bathrobe was, not surprisingly, when he got out of the shower. He would wear a nice, fluffy, Brooks Brothers type bathrobe, which was not at all like the bathrobe that he would wear when he was on the street. So it became pretty obvious to the people conducting the surveillance that he was engaging in a concerted effort to give an appearance to the public that was false, that was not the way he behaved in real life.
Investigators continued to watch Gigante's bizarre public behavior. But photos themselves are only a single link in proving criminal activity. Investigators needed hard evidence to corroborate what the photos were suggesting, that Gigante was in fact the boss. One wiretap conversation between Genovese crew members gave investigators more proof of Gigante's position in the family. On the tapes, known Genovese members were complaining about the chin. Assistant U.S. Attorney George Stamboulidis reviewed these tapes to help prepare a case against Gigante.
He's constantly nitpicking his men, trying to always, with a million questions, drilling them and questioning them on what they're involved in. He's always looking to get money from them, or money from some of the schemes and how he earned, and how much money he would make from the gambling operations at the Triangle Social Club and things like that.
While Gigante micromanaged the internal affairs of his family, the tabloids began calling him the Odd Father.
He would check himself in to a hospital once a year for what his colleagues in the mafia sarcastically referred to as tune-ups, so that he would have a paper trail showing that he had some, or giving the impression that he had some mental condition. And with the assistance of people around him and people in his family, he was able to cultivate this paper trail, giving the impression to anyone who looked at the cold medical records that here's someone who, year in, year out, was being treated for some form of mental illness.
Gigante knew how to protect himself, both publicly and privately.
Mr. Gigante was very clever in how he conducted business, and he limited his contacts with members of the family. If there were messages or items to be discussed regarding illegal activities conducted by the Genovese family, there would be messages passed on to people immediately surrounding him. Access to him was very limited. If the other family wanted to meet with him, more than likely they would have to send a message.
Gigante avoided the normal sit-downs or more formal meetings held regularly by other family bosses. He would take meetings when businesses demanded his attention. He and his visitors would stroll the sidewalks through the neighborhood, ensuring that surveillance wiretaps would not pick up any incriminating conversations. The always careful Gigante also suspected Ms. Esposito's phone was tapped, and it was. He never talked business on the phone. He would simply use a payphone or make arrangements to talk elsewhere. The FBI would not be able to use the Chin's own words to make a case against him. Other mobsters were not as smart. Sophisticated bugging operations were allowing the FBI to capture a multitude of other mob business on tape. In early 1985, the Justice Department was bearing down hard on a number of high-level organized crime figures. Most were being charged under the RICO Act. Though RICO had been around since the early 70s, it was only now receiving its first real test. Two of Gigante's men had gotten wind that the bosses of the Gambino and Lucchese families would soon be arrested. They wondered if the Chin was vulnerable. One commented that if he gets pinched, all those years in the asylum would be for nothing. On February 19th, the arrests of several crime family bosses were made. The next day, Vincent Gigante checked himself into the hospital and stayed a week. He had successfully avoided the indictment against the New York bosses. Among those arrested was Paul Castellano, head of the Gambino crime family. Prosecutors never brought him to trial. He was killed before they had the chance. By Cosa Nostra standards, the unsanctioned murders of Gambino boss Paul Castellano and his underboss Tommy Bellotti were unpardonable. Although John Gotti, a captain in the Gambino family, acted shocked at Castellano's death, it was widely believed that he was responsible. Within 2 weeks of the murders, Gotti had publicly taken over as boss. Vincent Gigante issued a subtle warning to Gotti. Without mentioning names, he told Gotti that the murderer would have to pay. It took 2 years, but in 1987, Gigante acted to avenge the murder of his friend and partner in mob business. Through his counselor, Bobby Manna, and some Lucchese family members, Gigante plotted to have Gotti killed. The planning session at a New Jersey restaurant was bugged, and because it was, the FBI saved John Gotti's life. If agents intercept information of a murder plot, they are required by law to try to prevent the killing. So based on the tape, agents warned Gotti. Acting on the FBI warning, John Gotti changed his plans on the day the murder was to take place. Because he was not where he was expected, the murder plot failed. Gigante, however, did not give up. He asked Vic Amuso, acting boss of the Lucchese family, to supervise another hit. It was up to Amuso and his men to work out the details.
And that was to have Amuso reach out to Al Diorco, one of his trusted men, just as Manna was one of Gigante's trusted men, and have Diorco use his contacts in other parts of the country to acquire a remote-controlled bomb.
But Gotti was arrested and imprisoned before the second plot could be carried out. He died of cancer while serving a life sentence for racketeering involving extortion and murder, including Castellano's. Meanwhile, the FBI had Chin's men on tape conspiring the murder. As the FBI's investigation into Genovese family operations continued, information about a corrupt construction scheme was coming to light. They learned that for years, much of the Genovese family income came from one segment of the construction industry, the window business. The family had managed to keep its hold on window replacement jobs for all of New York City's public housing projects.
We learned that at that time there was an enormous amount of money being put into refurbishing some of the New York City Housing Authority windows. There was an energy crisis underway, and the timing of this was ideal for the organized crime people to become more active in it. What we learned was that the Genovese family, along with 2 or 3 other families, were becoming involved in companies that were bidding and installing the windows in some of these housing projects. From the late 1970s up until the late 1980s, there was approximately $190 million worth of contracts given out by the city of New York for the window replacement industry.
It was classic mob business and a textbook example of racketeering. The mafia took over an industry to the exclusion of legitimate businesses. Union officials were corrupted. In this case, Iron Workers Local 580. Bids were rigged, and companies or workers trying to play by the rules lost out. For years, the Lucchese and Genovese families operated their construction schemes autonomously. By the early 80s, they realized that a partnership would be much more profitable. By this time, the Lucchese family had a firm hold on Local 580, and the Genovese family had corrupted several contractors. They cooperated because it meant more business.
By using the Local 580 as a tool, they were able to exclude several contractors from coming in and bidding on some of these projects, and in essence created a somewhat of a monopoly for themselves.
On nearly all city housing authority work, and on much of the new construction for the city, the Genovese contractors and installers paid $2 a window. $1 went to the Lucchese family, 25 cents to the collector, and 75 cents to the boss for the family's role in handling the union. The other $1 went to the crooked union officials who looked the other way as jobs went to non-union workers. Refusal to cooperate often carried a penalty of violence. In the late 80s, a carpenters union delegate had both of his legs broken by Genovese men for refusing to cooperate, though he maintained that he was unable to get a good look at his attackers. And in 1992, a delegate from Local 580 was shot and killed coming out of his house on Long Island over a disagreement with his Cosa Nostra contracts. The Lucchese and Genovese family arrangement was working very smoothly. That is, until Peter Savino was persuaded to wear a wire. Savino was a Genovese soldier and point man for the window racket.
We built a case on him, a murder case on him, and it was sufficiently compelling that he realized, like many of these people, that he didn't want to die in jail. So what did he do? He decided to cooperate. And for an 18-month period made tape recordings of people in the Genovese family and people in the Lucchese family operating this scheme.
Vincent Gigante didn't realize Peter Savino was turning on him. He was happy with Savino's work and satisfied with the window scheme's progression. Savino kept track of the money. He managed the contracts. He supervised the bids. He arranged the payoffs. The boss was happy, but some Genovese family members began to suspect Savino. When bodies were found in the basement of a building he owned, Genovese members were surprised that he was never seriously investigated by law enforcement.
As a result of that, people speculated, well, Savino wasn't arrested, yet these bodies were found in a building that's tied to him. Maybe he's cooperating, but nobody was really sure.
Savino was a cash cow for Vincent Gigante. He was bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars for the Genovese family every month. So when Gigante was told of Savino's betrayal, he chose not to believe it and initially refused to order him killed. Savino continued to wear the wire, trying to get other family members to acknowledge Chin and his position as boss of the family. Gigante's troops, however, could never be persuaded to break the boss's rule about not mentioning his name.
Remember Uniseal? Vincent had said when it came time to bid. Oh, okay, I'll mention him. He had said to go out and bid the work.
It was, don't mention that name. How can you talk like that? That was pretty damning proof. Even though it didn't give you a specific crime, it told you that this was a man to be feared. It was hardly somebody who was incompetent.
Shortly thereafter, it came to Gigante's attention that Savino was in fact cooperating. Furious at this betrayal, Gigante ordered the murder of Peter Savino. By that time, the FBI had relocated Savino well out of Genovese family reach, but not before he supplied agents with thousands of hours of taped conversations.
Mr. Savino was also in a position to provide us with the historical aspects of how the scheme developed, his relationship with the leaders of both the Lucchese and Genovese crime family, and what their participation was in this thing. Mr. Savino also was able to tell us how the various members of all of these families interacted with Local 580, which was used again as the tool to make the scheme work.
The FBI was successfully employing the RICO laws to bring down New York's most powerful bosses. As a result, high-ranking family members saw that their only way to avoid long prison terms was to cooperate. Among them were Gambino family underboss Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano. Gigante was finally arrested and charged under the RICO laws with ordering 6 people murdered, conspiring to kill 3 others, and at least 24 counts of racketeering. In short, Gigante was charged with being the boss of the Genovese crime family. But Gigante still had his mental illness history to fall back on.
Mr. Gigante was indicted in May of 1990, and his second indictment was filed against him in June of 1993. The case against Mr. Gigante was unusual, that it spanned several years before it actually went to trial. He eventually went to trial in June of 1997. During that period of time, the issue that was before the courts was that whether he was competent to stand trial or not. That issue was finally resolved in 1996.
7 years after his arrest, a federal district judge declared Vincent Gigante competent to stand trial. Vincent the Chin Gigante was 69 years old when a jury convicted him of conspiring to kill 3 mafia figures, including Gotti and Savino. He was also found guilty of extortion and union payoff conspiracies in the window replacement scheme. But jurors failed to convict him on charges of directly ordering 6 murders. Now that Gigante was convicted, his defense lawyers argued that he was not fit to be sentenced. They claimed he was too old, too frail, and too mentally incompetent to understand the punishment. While awaiting sentencing, Gigante was confined to a prison hospital and examined by several doctors. Gigante was given several PET scans, a procedure that uses a radioactive tracer to measure brain chemistry. A 1991 scan, first read as normal, was later found to be too flawed to use in diagnosis. A 1993 scan did show some abnormalities. But at least one expert, Dr. Jonathan Brody, judged these abnormalities as not consistent with dementia. Dr. Brody is an attending psychiatrist at New York's Bellevue Hospital and a professor at New York University's School of Medicine. He also conducts research on schizophrenia.
Mr. Gigante, at the time of the scan, was purportedly taking medication that affects the brain. And because it affects the brain, it affects brain chemistry, and brain chemistry is what a PET scan is all about.
Gigante was taking an antipsychotic medication, and antidepressants, a low-potency tranquilizer, and sleeping pills. So Dr. Brody was skeptical about the PET scan, but had yet to examine the patient.
When the 3 of us entered the observation room, the examining room where he was then brought, I was struck at first by his appearance, which I said made me think, oh my God, he really is sick. I've missed the boat. He's really very sick. He came in wearing a bathrobe, he was shuffling, he was mumbling, he was making allusions to God.
But as the examination progressed, some of Gigante's actions began to raise doubts.
But one of the things that really struck me was that I didn't note at the time, but I noted a few seconds later, was when I put out my hand for him to shake it, he didn't shake it. And that's a very automatic behavior. You put your hand out, your worst enemy can put his hand out to you, and you tend to take it.
How about this way?
When Gigante was asked the names of his children, he didn't know. When he was asked where he lived, he didn't know.
And yet, these are things that people tend not to forget. You know, the brain in a dementia tends to work on the process of accounting. The last in, first out, so recent memory tends to be lost, but that's why people who are very demented can often remember very well events from long ago, even if they can't remember recent events. Well, he was not consistent on that. Indeed, he was asked the question about who the President of the United States was, which is a standard question on a psychiatric mental status evaluation. And he scratched his head and he looked perplexed and he said, I should know that. I should know that answer. It's in there somewhere. And some more questions were asked. He said, I really should know that. And then finally he said, Bush. George Bush. And I sat there and thought, oh, he remembered the question. What was striking was not that the answer was incorrect. What was striking was that the question was remembered despite all of the interfering questions.
And there were other red flags. He seemed to understand abstract concepts. Dr. Brody asked Gigante if he was proud of his children.
Now, pride is really quite an abstract notion. And his response was, yes, they're all working. Legitimate jobs. Legitimacy? Well, that wasn't even a question. Legitimate implies yet something else, that he was able to abstract from the question some intent as to what the question was involved with, and awareness of a distinction between legitimacy and illegitimacy. And here was a man who didn't know what month it was. He didn't know if he was in a hospital.
These and other inconsistencies contributed to Dr. Brody's conclusion that Gigante did not suffer from progressive dementia, vascular dementia, or schizophrenia. Guards assigned to watch Gigante during his pre-sentencing hospitalization also found his behavior normal. They testified that he was active around his prison hospital cell and polite to the hospital staff. He did not need help to shower, to groom himself, or to feed himself.
The lawyers all put in affidavits that they couldn't communicate with Vincent Gigante at all. Well, when he was in jail, he managed to speak with the prison counselors. When you sort of talk to the sort of low-level people in jail who have to take care of inmates on a day-to-day basis, it turns out he knew exactly what had happened. He knew he had been on trial. He knew that Gravano had testified against him and didn't have very nice things to say about him. He knew that his sentencing was upcoming. He knew what the issue was before Judge Weinstein as to that he had to decide that he was competent to be sentenced. It was completely at odds with what his lawyers were telling Judge Weinstein.
Some psychiatrists thought Gigante really was incompetent. Others thought he was faking. 5 months and dozens of tests later, the judge ruled. The judge said, in short, the defendant's cognitive and emotional capacity and his communication skills are equivalent to other 69-year-old defendants with limited education. No hallucinations interfere with his abilities to participate in sentencing. He understands the fundamentals of criminal substantive law and procedure. He is deliberately feigning mental illness to avoid punishment which he fears. Defendant is competent to be sentenced and to serve an appropriate term in prison. Shaliro described efforts of the FBI and prosecutors as historic and courageous.
This has been a battle that certainly I've been involved with for the last 20 years, and certainly I think agents that will continue that on over the next 5 or 6 years. If the effort could be sustained and the resources maintained, I think we're on the verge of really reducing the effects and the impact of the Cosa Nostra.
To be sure, the government's legal victory in the Gigante case was partial. The jury, after all, failed to convict him of the 6 murder charges. He was originally sentenced to 12 years. In 2003, he pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and earned 3 more years, finally admitting in court that he had been faking insanity the entire time. The dense and rugged Alaskan wilderness provided the perfect cover for a fierce and sadistic killer. He preyed on women, kidnapping them, raping them, torturing them. He hunted them like animals for his own twisted pleasure.
In the 1970s and 80s, people went to Alaska looking for a fresh start, to reinvent themselves, or to disappear for a while. Some of those disappearances weren't by choice. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. A serial killer's rampage was exposed when the bodies of young women began turning up in shallow graves that dotted the Alaskan wilderness. The killer was at home in the rugged terrain, but the hunt for him began 3,000 miles away, where FBI profilers mapped the criminal's mind.
She was a hopeful young model looking for her break. She accepted a job with a man who claimed to be a photographer, but turned out to be a merciless killer. She wasn't his first victim, or his last. From the 70s through the mid-80s, the wilderness of Alaska became a popular destination as people flowed north to construct the Alaskan pipeline. The population boomed. On August 13th, 1982, 2 off-duty Anchorage police officers were hunting moose near the Knik River, in a wilderness about 20 miles from Anchorage. As they made their way through the dense forests, they happened upon partially buried human remains. They left it undisturbed. The next day, crime scene technicians from the Alaska State Troopers arrived at the scene. Crimes out here fell under state jurisdiction. Besides clothing and an elastic bandage, troopers found a .223 caliber shell casing in the shallow grave.
Conveniently buried here in the sand.
Dental records identified the remains as 23-year-old Sherry Morrow, an exotic dancer reported missing a year earlier by her boyfriend. Troopers called him in to break the news. Her clothes matched the ones he reported her missing in, but her good luck charm, the gold arrowhead pendant she never took off, was gone. Morrow was probably murdered shortly after she disappeared, giving the killer more than a year to cover his tracks. Finding him would be next to impossible. In the year following the discovery of Sherry Morrow's body, more women began turning up. It's a sad truth that finding bodies in the Alaskan wilderness wasn't all that unusual. 2 or 3 times a year, some novice hiker or hunter would get lost and succumb to the elements. But a growing number of bodies had a different story to tell. During new road construction on September 2nd, 1983, a crew unearthed human skeletal remains not far from where Sherry Morrow's body had been found 1 year earlier. The bones had obviously been here for some time, yet until recently this area of the Connect River was so remote that it could only be accessed by boat or light plane. The remains were identified as 17-year-old Paula Goulding, an out-of-work secretary who had moved to Alaska from Hawaii. She had been missing for 5 months. Like Sherry Morrow, she had taken a job as an exotic dancer to make ends meet. And like Sherry Morrow, a .223 caliber cartridge was found at the site. For Alaska State Trooper Wayne Van Clausen, the connection was frightening.
And that's about when everything started to become kind of scary for everybody, because the profile was the same. They were topless dancers from the clubs downtown, but that was certainly when there was the belief that there was a serial murderer out there.
2 bodies had been found, but now troopers believed there were more. They began to revisit missing persons reports. Many of those reported missing were exotic dancers, but in Alaska, their disappearance was not unusual.
Missing persons was a relatively low priority. Statutorily, if you're an adult, you have a right to be missing. And there were a lot of instances where these girls would just jump on a plane and go away.
Between 1980 and 1983, 12 women had been reported missing. That was only a fraction of the unreported total. Troopers now wondered how many of the missing women were victims of the killer. That would be difficult to determine. The Alaska State Troopers sent the evidence from the Sherry Morrow and Paula Goulding crime scenes to the FBI's laboratory in Washington, D.C. for analysis. The FBI ran ballistics tests on both shell casings to see if they were shot from the same gun. State troopers hoped the results could provide them with strong evidence that the same person committed both murders. The lab results were conclusive. Both women were killed by the same high-powered rifle. There was little doubt Alaska troopers were dealing with a serial killer. While they began their hunt for him in the wilderness, the Anchorage police were dealing with their own problems. Every city has its dark side, and Anchorage is no different. Except that in Alaska, the nights are longer and darker. In the 70s and 80s, Anchorage was a frontier town. Men came here to work hard, and women followed to ease their loneliness. Some women were lured to the strip clubs, hoping to earn a quick buck. Others, looking for more respectable opportunities, worked in the clubs until something better came up. For many, it never did. And in the city's streets roamed a stalker. He chose carefully. His victims were hardly missed. For in a city made up largely of strangers, it's difficult to be a missing person. Some of the women who disappeared from Anchorage turned up safely. Some didn't turn up at all. But disappearances weren't the only crimes being reported. On the early morning of June 13th, 1983, Cindy Polson, age 17, ran down an Anchorage highway. She was partially dressed and in handcuffs. She managed to flag down a passing truck. She was running for her life. The motorist dropped her off at her motel apartment. The desk clerk had called the Anchorage police.
Miss Paulson?
An officer removed her handcuffs and tried to calm her.
You all right? Here, let me get this.
Anchorage police officer Greg Baker recalls the incident.
We found her in handcuffs with very little clothes on. She was real credible. She was very scared, she was very frightened, and she told us her story.
Paulson, a prostitute, told Baker that she picked up a trick the night before. She described him as wiry, scruffy, about 6 feet tall, with glasses and a stutter. He was not the kind of person she thought of as threatening. But as soon as she stepped into his car, he handcuffed her and put a wood-handled revolver to her head. They drove to a respectable residential neighborhood. He pulled her into his house. The place was well kept and full of hunting trophies. He had a chain hanging from the ceiling of his den. He chained her up and stripped her. And there she was tortured and raped repeatedly for hours. Then he went to take a nap, leaving her there. But he wasn't through yet. He said he was going to take her to his cabin in the wilderness. He said if she tried to get anyone's attention, he'd kill her, and them as well. He told her he already had his alibi worked out. His friends were willing to lie for him. No one would believe her story. They ended up at the airport. She could see him loading a weapon into a small aircraft. She also saw her chance for escape. Her one chance to save her life. The story sounded outrageous, but her genuine terror compelled Officer Baker to check it out.
I had a very street-smart female, scared to death, with a story about being taken at gunpoint and held prisoner at a specific location that she described where it was, so she knew where it was. She described the interior of the location. She described the den, up to and including various animals were mounted on the wall.
En route to the hospital for an examination, Paulson insisted on stopping at the airport to show police the airplane she had seen earlier. She positively identified it.
While we were in there, we had a security guard stop us and describe the car the same way that Cindy described the car, and in fact gave us a license number. That license number confirmed the address, or the area at least, that Cindy had given us regarding where the house was.
Police went to the address to speak to the owner of the car. They arrived moments before he pulled up, driving the vehicle described by Cindy Paulson. So far, everything Paulson said had checked out. But the suspect had his own story to tell. According to the motor vehicle records, the car that Cindy Paulson was abducted in belonged to Robert Hansen, a baker in Anchorage. Hansen, who fit the description of the man Paulson described, calmly answered questions. He said he was at a friend's house from 5 p.m. to 11:30 p.m., repairing a seat for his airplane. Afterward, he went to the home of another friend and stayed until around 5:30 that morning. Then he went to the airport and installed the seat. Hansen gave police his consent to search his house. Again, his home was exactly as Paulson had described. That only proved she'd been in the house, not that Hansen had raped and tortured her there. They could find no evidence of that. They did notice a loose-fitting wall panel. Behind it, they found a collection of weapons, but that wasn't surprising. Hansen was an avid hunter. They did find a revolver, but it didn't match the one that Paulson described. The gun, the chain, and the blanket she was wrapped in were nowhere to be found. Hansen's car appeared equally clean. Anchorage police found nothing in his car that fit Paulson's story.
Those alibis were corroborated and verified, and Mr. Hansen was released after a consent search of his house.
Paulson, still shaken from her ordeal, was able to pick Hansen's picture out of a photo lineup. But when given the chance to take a lie detector test, she refused. Her occupation gave her an inherent distrust of the police, and gave police an inherent distrust of her. She felt she'd never be taken seriously. Soon after, she left town for a while to try to put the nightmare behind her. Anchorage authorities were willing to let it drop too.
I found out because the alibis were corroborated and because they had a problem with Cindy Paulson appearing and disappearing, and of course her lifestyle left a lot to be desired, that the case had been suspended at the Anchorage Police Department.
Police had gathered no solid evidence linking her story to Robert Hansen. But for Officer Greg Baker, it wasn't over. He was one officer who believed Paulson's story and wouldn't let it go. The predator roaming the streets of Anchorage was still out there, free to claim more victims. Robert Hansen, the most likely suspect in the abduction and rape of Cindy Paulson, had been released for a lack of solid evidence. Officer Baker was still curious. Lately, the Anchorage police had been grappling with what seemed like more than their share of missing persons reports, involving prostitutes like Paulson, or exotic dancers, or women out by themselves. Paulson's assertion that she was about to be put on a plane only reinforced his creeping suspicions about Hansen.
He had taken her to the airport where he was going to fly her out with the story that if she maintained her helpfulness, that he'd bring her back and let her go. Well, Cindy was bright enough to know that she was on a one-way trip, and so was I. And so I kind of just put two and two together and figured that he was a very good suspect for the missing dancers.
Baker's supervisor had suspended the investigation into Robert Hansen, but Baker couldn't let it go. Cindy Paulson's nightmarish story had too much detail to not have some basis in truth. But no one except Baker would listen to her. He continued his investigation. On the surface, Baker found nothing in Hansen's record to arouse suspicion. He had moved to Anchorage from Iowa 16 years earlier and opened a bakery. It was a huge success. He had a wife and children, and except for his stutter, he fit in completely. When he wasn't in the kitchen, Hansen enjoyed flying his small airplane, a Super Cub Piper. Back on the ground, he took to the woods. He was a solid citizen. He just didn't fit the model of a serial killer. There were plenty of others drifting through Alaska more suited to that role. They didn't have businesses. They didn't have families. Hansen did. He had everything to lose. Frank Rothschild was a prosecutor involved in the Paulson case.
Bob the baker. The troopers and the police used to go to his donut shop all the time. It was a very popular place to go. He had a bakery. People knew him. He was friendly. He was just a hard-working guy.
Unaware of Officer Greg Baker's local investigation in Anchorage, state troopers were still trying to find their serial killer. Bodies continued to be unearthed in the Alaskan wilderness. Troopers set up a task force to study the similarities between the missing women and the murder victims. They hoped to find a common thread that would lead to a suspect. Until authorities knew more, they did their best to educate dancers and prostitutes about playing safe. For the first time, police and prostitutes were on the same side. According to Rothschild, the goal was preservation.
Law enforcement were then, and had been for a time, advising young women who were working in some of these clubs and who were working the streets to be careful, and to advise them there was a maniac out there who seemed to be abducting and killing people.
A little digging revealed that Hansen's criminal history was extensive. 12 years earlier, in 1971, he'd been arrested twice for kidnapping, rape, and assault with a deadly weapon. They were crimes that bore an eerie resemblance to what Cindy Paulson had endured. Baker couldn't bring this information to his supervisor. The Paulson case had been officially suspended, and Baker was bucking authority. That left him no alternative.
And at that time, I gathered up all the reports and background that I could find on Mr. Hansen and carried it over to the troopers.
When the troopers received the file from Officer Baker, they were optimistic. Paulson's testimony, along with Hansen's police record from Anchorage, made him a prime suspect in the state case. The troopers' investigation dovetailed with Baker's. They were both dealing with the same maniac. Robert Hansen was their best suspect.
I think everybody was looking at him real seriously because he made a good suspect when you looked into him. He had a pretty extensive criminal background, including some sexual assaults.
The only problem was the proof. Though Hansen was a violent sex offender, his record indicated nothing about being capable of homicide, nor was there any direct link from him to Sherry Morrow, Paula Goulding, and the other missing women. At this point, troopers didn't even have enough for a search warrant. They knew only that 3 women were dead and 12 were missing. Out there lurked a serial killer. Troopers needed to catch him before he killed again. They needed help.
We knew we had a mass murder on our hands. That was not something Alaska had any experience with. Somebody obviously knew that the FBI not only had experience with it, but had set out this unit that was designed specifically to try to assist in discovering who these people were.
To catch a killer in their own backyard, the troopers called on help from over 3,000 miles away. Only the FBI had the resources needed to get inside a killer's head. When the Alaska State Troopers determined they had a serial killer on their hands, they realized they didn't have the expertise to stop him. But they knew who did. Quantico, Virginia is home to the FBI's Investigative Support Unit. Here, agents attempt to predict behavioral patterns by analyzing a criminal's actions. Retired FBI agent John Douglas helped pioneer behavioral profiling and still works as a consultant. His profiles are based on 25 years interviewing convicted killers. They taught Douglas how to think like they do. He's learned that serial killers are acting out their fantasies of control and conquest. As Douglas slowly wins their trust, he takes them back to the scene of their crime.
You finally get them talking, they start giving you that 1,000-yard stare. They're back 10 years ago, 20 years ago when they were perpetrating the crime, and they kind of lock into that 1,000-yard stare, and their memory is just so precise. And the fantasy is what keeps them going over and over and enables them to survive when they're incarcerated. So I got to tap into that. It takes time, but once I'm in there, I get tremendous information.
From these interviews, he distilled a checklist of traits and habits that serial killers share. They start young, with lesser crimes such as arson or cruelty to animals. Over the years, their violence builds. To every new case, profilers bring the knowledge of how killers evolve.
To understand the criminal, you must look at the crime. You just want to see if you can come up with an analysis based upon preliminary police reports, crime scene photographs, a profile of the victim, autopsy protocol, reviewing that, review the autopsy photographs, do an analysis of the overall crime, the risk level that the subject took, the victim risk level, analysis of the area, maybe the crime scene, maybe you have multiple crime scenes, and then based upon that, you attempt now to come up with a specific type of profile.
By examining every aspect of an unsolved crime, a profiler can determine specific characteristics of that killer, such as age, occupation, and physical characteristics. The troopers contacted the FBI to see if the Bureau could work up an analysis of the Anchorage killer. They hoped the profile would sharpen the investigation and bring overlooked clues to light. The troopers gave the FBI what they needed to build the behavioral profile. For a scrupulous, accurate profile, they required only facts from the troopers, no analysis or theories. Trooper Wayne Van Clausen didn't want to lose any time. The information he received from Officer Baker aroused his suspicions about Robert Hansen, but he needed more information. Criminal records were just beginning to be computerized, and he didn't have access to them all in Anchorage. While the profile was being developed, he went to Juneau to collect Hansen's records from the Superior and Supreme Court archives. In his fact-finding mission, Van Clausen researched every town that Hansen had ever lived in. He found reports on Robert Hansen dating back to 1961. He gathered all that he could carry, sent the rest by truck, then headed home. While he was in Juneau, the FBI had come through with a criminal profile of the serial killer. The fact that the killer was so prolific meant to Douglas that he could function unnoticed within the community. Someone who worked independently, most likely a business owner. The killer would be an avid outdoorsman, since the bodies were recovered in remote areas of wilderness. Since he preyed on prostitutes, Douglas concluded the killer had difficulty talking to women, had low self-esteem, and grew up feeling like an outcast. Based on killers with similar profiles, Douglas provided a specific characteristic to explain the cause of those feelings of inadequacy, a feature that bore an eerie resemblance to Robert Hansen.
The one that totally blew us all away, I think, is that when they said he's either going to be a stutterer or someone who has a lisp, a speech defect. How do you figure that? But that was one of the things that they suggested might show up.
The FBI profile pointed to Robert Hansen, but the depths of Douglas's insight were about to be known. Upon Van Clausen's return, troopers studied the files. The records showed that Hansen had spent 3 years in a reformatory for setting fire to his old high school's bus garage. Based on their work with previous killers, the FBI profilers said the killer would have a history of arson.
You have a boyfriend?
Yes, actually I do.
Yeah, because
The profile painted the killer as a social misfit. Hansen's court-ordered psychiatric reports from his days at the reformatory bore this out.
That's the boyfriend, girl.
Yes, I'm really busy right now, you know.
I don't mean anything like, I mean, you know.
His stutter was a social barrier that undermined his self-confidence. Whenever he tried to assert himself, he'd be slapped down.
I have a lot of work to do, or I'm gonna call security on you.
He never forgot the sting. The profile said the killer would learn to function as a normal member of society while his perversions festered within. His record showed that in his 30s, Hansen began working at a bakery. He would brag to co-workers about his kleptomania and the sense of power it gave him. He also bragged about his love of hunting. He took great pleasure in exerting power over his prey, stalking it, then wounding it. And he became good at the kill, winning prestigious awards. In 1967, he moved to Alaska to start a new life and for better hunting. 3 years after moving there, his record showed he was arrested for the attempted rape of a young receptionist at gunpoint. He pleaded no contest to assault with a deadly weapon. A little more than a month later, he was indicted for the attempted assault of an 18-year-old woman he'd followed home.
As soon as the man got to Alaska, he was involved in theft cases, he was involved in abductions, he had psychiatric evaluations showing him to be really unstable and having all kinds of weird sexual fantasies and the rest.
True to the profile, Hansen seemed a respectable citizen, so the courts were lenient. In one case, he claimed to have memory lapses and was given psychiatric treatment and 5 years in a work release program. He abducted one of his early victims outside a coffee shop, took her to a cabin in the wilderness, and raped her at gunpoint. She was 17 at the time.
He told me, of course, if I called the police, that he would hunt me down and kill me. He told me he was a fine, outstanding businessman. He had never mentioned at any point when during the rape time or before or after that he was married, but he said he's a fine, outstanding businessman and that I was just a kid and nobody would believe me.
And he was right. Everything the profiler said about the perpetrator of the serial killings fits suspect Robert Hansen, a truly dangerous man who was passing as a nondescript face in the crowd. While troopers zeroed in on Hansen, they spread out to search for more victims in the Knik River area, where 3 bodies had been found. They believed that the dancers who were still missing may have been buried close to the other grave sites. But troopers came up empty. The area was too large and remote to cover completely. Despite the compelling FBI profile and the past police records, troopers lacked anything tangible to link Hansen to the killings. His police records were too stale, the evidence too circumstantial to hold any weight in a court of law. Investigators hoped that Cindy Paulson could help. She was the only surviving victim to Hansen's current wave of violence. Perhaps she could remember something else from her ordeal. Paulson gave another statement. But this time, she was able to ID one of the guns Hansen had in his possession. Aside from Paulson, Hansen had not been implicated in a rape or abduction for more than 10 years. But in the hopes of strengthening their case and establishing a pattern of behavior, investigators searched for another of Hansen's victims from years earlier, whose experience matched Paulson's. Although this prior victim no longer lived in the area, troopers tracked her down and asked for her help.
I had gotten a call from Alaska asking if I would like to maybe help with a conviction for Mr. Hansen. They had explained to me that he had killed, to the best of their knowledge, 7 women. And they explained to me that the last woman had broken free.
She agreed to testify when the time came, but troopers still had a weak case. The troopers felt confident they were on the right track. They didn't have enough to prove that Hansen was a serial killer. According to Anchorage Police Officer Greg Baker, Hansen knew that authorities were onto something.
One morning I was driving by and I needed to get some donuts for the shift. Mr. Hansen was there and he had a window that he stood in and decorated cakes and cupcakes and cookies. And I remember watching him. He kept looking up at me and you could tell he was nervous. And he kept putting frosting on his thumb. And I liked that.
Although investigators had Hansen in their sights, they still lacked the evidence to connect him directly to the crimes. But because Hansen matched the profile so closely, Douglas flew to Alaska to review the case and to brief the troopers and prosecutor Frank Rothschild on how to proceed with the suspect. Douglas was confident that Hansen was their serial killer. The hunter was now the hunted.
So the mission was to provide a analysis for them. Does he have the capability to commit a crime like this? And the answer was yes. I believe this prostitute, and I believe he's capable of perpetrating these crimes.
Douglas's idea was to bring Hansen in for questioning while simultaneously searching his house. To obtain a warrant, investigators needed to list specific items they believed to be in the house. They knew to look for the gun that Cindy Paulson described, and the one that fired the bullets found in the graves of Sherry Morrow and Paula Goulding. That wasn't enough. They needed a home run, something that would prove Hansen's guilt in no uncertain terms. They asked Douglas if there was anything else to list in the warrant.
Yes, some of the research findings is we're dealing here with a serial killer. And serial killers, it starts off as fantasy. And one of the things to keep the fantasy going after the crime is because they're on the hunt nightly looking for victims, is they take some type of memento. We call them either souvenirs or trophies, something belonging to the victims.
Douglas helped prosecutors write the affidavit based on the likelihood of finding mementos mentioned in the profile.
Okay, anything else? I've got those two.
Anything from a piece of the victim's jewelry to a driver's license.
We don't have any.
But a behavioral profile had never been used as the basis of a search warrant in the United States before. Rothschild knew he'd need to back it up with more conventional information.
Obviously, the district attorney's office wanted this search warrant to be bulletproof. They wanted it to be absolutely, positively, without flaw. Because they knew this was a big, big case. The last thing they wanted was to have something wrong with the search warrant and have all the evidence thrown out.
The affidavit swelled to 48 pages. The judge granted 8 search warrants for Hansen's property. Now, they just needed Hansen. They had learned his pattern, knew his schedule. On October 23, 1983, they went to pick him up at his bakery. But Hansen wasn't there. He'd gotten off to a late start, unwittingly keeping the troopers waiting 20 tense minutes.
Robert Hansen? Alaska State Surgeon, will you step away from your car?
When asked to come in for questioning, he didn't resist. The interrogation room was ready for him. The goal was to keep him off balance, hoping to elicit a confession and avoid a lengthy legal case. Douglas helped the troopers design the interrogation room for the biggest psychological impact. Crime scene photos and related materials were strewn everywhere for Hansen to contemplate before his interview. At the appointed moment, the troopers arrived, and the mind game began.
Mr. Hansen?
The FBI coached Rothschild on how to play it.
Ask him questions in a way that would prompt more discussion. So that's game plan number one. Then obviously, we've got all of these cases that have been investigated. And to get him to talk specifically about those, he's trying to search us out. What do we know? So I could see his game plan was to kind of find out what we knew and play off of that. And my game plan, of course, is to find out what he knew.
While Rothschild tried to get Hansen to open up and confess, troopers served the search warrants. Hansen's wife was home. The troopers were extra cautious, videotaping the entire procedure. What they were looking for could be anywhere, even in plain sight. Hansen knew the troopers had access to his police and psychological records. He didn't tell authorities anything they didn't already know. He spoke of his painful upbringing, his strict family, his anger. He admitted to picking up dancers and prostitutes in the early 70s, and how enraged he became when they tried to raise their prices. But he denied threatening any of them. He admitted nothing. While Hansen told his story and his house was being turned inside out, other troopers headed to his bakery and to the airport to search his plane. Both were clean. The house became the focal point of the investigation. A careful search of the upstairs bedroom finally yielded a curious and eerie discovery. An aerial map of the region, peppered with 37 X's. They seemed to be clustered mainly around the area where bodies had been found. But there were dozens more marks than bodies, at least so far. The searchers continued up to the attic. Under insulation, the troopers found weapons. Among the items found were a .223 Ruger Mini 14 rifle, like the one used to kill Sherry Morrow and Paula Goulding, and a wood-handled revolver resembling the one described by Cindy Paulson.
Yeah.
The search team let Van Clausen know the good news.
Sounds good. These women look familiar? Have you ever seen them?
The net was closing on Hansen, and he knew it. But he wasn't ready to talk just yet.
Take another look.
The interview dragged on for hours. It didn't seem like a confession was likely.
I haven't, never seen.
While troopers collected the evidence, the case unwound even further. Hansen's friend and neighbors stopped by, curious about the activity. She was stunned by the news, then made a confession that demolished the last of Hansen's story. She told troopers that her husband provided Hansen with his alibi on the night of Cindy Paulson's abduction. He'd lied to protect his friend, not realizing how serious Hansen's charges were. The husband later called police and retracted his statement. Hansen's alibi evaporated. As the search continued, the troopers found the most incriminating evidence so far. Evidence that Douglas knew had to be there somewhere. They found Sherry Morrow's necklace and other personal property belonging to the dead or missing women. They had found Hansen's stash of trophies.
Yeah, this is Baker here.
Investigators called the station. Though they had Hansen where they wanted him, still he wouldn't confess. But they had enough to lock him up on the Cindy Paulson case. Bail was set at $500,000. Investigators now had time to build their case against Hansen as a serial killer. They called the prior victim to see if she was still on board.
And at that time, they thought he had killed 11 women. And was I still interested in being a witness? They really felt that they may need me because he hadn't confessed.
All right, what you got?
3 points on the map found in his bedroom matched the locations of bodies recovered by the troopers. Another X marked the location of a body recovered by Seward police years earlier. The remaining X's presumably marked the graves of more victims, dozens of them.
Looking at the map obviously was pretty chilling because we believed the map. The map was a body count as far as we were concerned. The man had kept track. He didn't have newspaper clippings. He had the map.
When the troopers believed they had enough to convict Hansen on at least 4 murders, they confronted him and his lawyer with the evidence. Hansen couldn't refute it. He had no place left to hide. Finally, it was time to confess. Time for Hansen to cut a deal. Hansen said he would confess to the murders that could be proven, as long as the trial was given no publicity and that his family be left alone. He demanded that he be imprisoned outside of Alaska when the trial was over. In exchange for only 4 convictions, he agreed to show the troopers where more bodies were buried. Investigators called the prior victim to tell her the good news.
The third time they called back and said that he had confessed and they wouldn't need me. So I hung up the phone when we were done talking, got my son off to school, got my husband out the door, and proceeded to fall apart. I started crying. I couldn't stop. I had no control over it. It controlled me. I could see each and every one of those women, how they died, probably hunted down like dogs, wounded and then hunted more.
In his confession, Hansen described how he would take his victims into the woods and hunt them as prey. Over the dozen years that he lived in Alaska, he'd raped more than 30 women and developed many strategies for capturing them. Once he found a likely target, a solitary woman like Sherry Morrow. He would befriend her and arrange to meet her at a fast food place. If they were dancers or aspiring models, he'd offer to pay to photograph them. He'd arrive early and stay in his car. That way he'd be certain the woman arrived alone and had no one waiting for her in the parking lot. No witnesses. Then he'd go in and meet his new victim. One half of the handcuff was already fastened to the seat. Hansen boasted that snapping the other half onto his victim's wrist while reaching for his gun became like a reflex. Then he would take them home or to a remote motel to rape and torture them. Afterwards, he'd blindfold them and drive or fly them to the outskirts of town until he arrived at a secluded spot, his hunting ground. His habit was to toy with his prey before he made the kill. Hansen confessed that in the summer of '83, he devised what he called his summer plan. He sent his family away so he could bring his victims home. When he was done with them, he'd dispose of them in the wilderness. On February 27, 1984, Robert Hansen was convicted of murdering 4 women and sentenced to 461 years plus life with no chance of parole. After his sentencing, Hansen accompanied troopers into the field to find more of his victims, represented by X's on his map. A total of 8 victims were found. Some places on the map went unexplored. Bears scavenged others, scattering the remains. Investigators will never know how many of the 37 X's represented one of Hansen's victims. According to John Douglas, the map might have depicted only a small part of his hunting grounds.
Killers like Hansen will come into contact with a lot of women, but fantasy is everything, and they may not like the way the person talks or the person dresses, the style, and so they'll make a decision. Well, this one will live. This one over here will die. I believe he was good for a lot more cases, and I still believe there was a chance that one of the reasons that caused him to go up to Alaska, he was running away from homicides back in the lower 48.
In the United States, an estimated 35 to 50 serial killers are active at any given time. Profiling has made them easier to spot and apprehend. Each time one is captured, investigators learn more about their twisted motivations, making it easier to catch the next one.